Our story begins with the birth of a little boy who was hanging on his mother's umbilical cord and had golden hair. This little boy wondered where he was and if he was in heaven. When he opened his bright blue eyes, he saw the light of the world for the first time and noticed that it felt quite warm. He quickly closed his eyes again and enjoyed the warmth surrounding him. His mother held him in her arms, cuddling with her newborn son, and gave him the name El. As he continued to sleep in her arms, she expressed her love for him and hoped that he felt safe and secure. However, El's thoughts revolved around where he might be. A few years passed, and our story took a little leap. It was night. And the loving mother had just come home, calling out to her son, but using a diminutive form of his name, Eli. The house had a blue roof and looked neither too big nor too small from the outside, giving an overall cozy impression. The light from inside the house shone out through the windows, illuminating the surroundings. El's mother entered the room, greeting her son with a wave and asking if he had been good and looked after the house while she was away. El sighed and told his mother that his name was El, and he was not pleased that she kept using the diminutive form of his name. He turned to her and explained that he didn't want to talk to her anymore if she didn't call him by his proper name. His mother was shocked and didn't want to believe it. She knelt down dejectedly and told El that she called him Eli because she found it endearing. Shocked and sad that he yelled at her, El approached his mother, touching her shoulder and trying to comfort her. His mother had to hold back tears. El told her not to cry and that she could still call him Eli if she wanted to. Overjoyed, she hugged her son and asked him if he meant it, emphasizing how incredibly sweet he was. After the hug, El went to his room, opened the door, and stood in front of a large bookshelf. He realized that whenever he spent time with his mother, he became too relaxed and lost track of time. He found this adaptability frightening and gazed thoughtfully into the distance. El had been living in this world for 7 years but didn't know why he was here. He also had memories of his previous life and knew that he was reborn in this new life. In his old life, El had lost his parents at a young age and led a busier life than his peers to pay off the debts they had left behind. He wondered if he would now have the chance to live a more beautiful and peaceful life, now that he was reborn, and he wanted to seize this opportunity. Back then, as a student, he didn't have many opportunities to make money and ensure his survival. His thoughts revolved around odd jobs, and after a while, he had completed all sorts of jobs once. One of them was being a professional gamer. Back then, El didn't want to reveal too much about his private life and used a pseudonym. By winning prize money, he could easily earn some money, and he realized that this was also his best way to make money. It was a beautiful day back then, the sun was shining, and the sky was clear of clouds. One could see a beautiful school building in El's former self, sitting at his desk in school, looking into a book. His former name was Kim Jun-sung, and he was 19 years old. He wore a headband, had slightly longer dark hair, and was in a school uniform. There were also a few handkerchiefs on the windowsill, which he had brought for whatever reason. As he was jotting down some notes in his book, a young woman appeared before him, and Kim greeted her. The young woman glanced at his notepad, praised him, and said he was truly amazing. She was genuinely impressed and mentioned that the current coursework was quite challenging, but she expected nothing less from the top student in the class. Additionally, she asked if he had changed his headband and complimented him on it, finding it cute. She was curious about where he had bought it and wanted to try it on herself. She desperately tried to strike up a conversation with Kim, but he simply replied with a simple no when she asked if she could try it on too. This response nearly brought tears to the eyes of the pretty young woman. Kim had not anticipated this reaction and jumped up in surprise, waving his hands, and asked her to wait so he could explain why he said no. Meanwhile, another person was walking behind him, feeling a bit bewildered by the situation. Kim explained to her that there was a reason why he didn't want to give her the headband and looked somewhat sad. Then, the person behind him simply took off his headband, surprising him because he didn't expect someone to remove his headband without asking. Both young women looked at Kim and told him that he looked much better without the headband. Their eyes sparkled, and they both said simultaneously that they needed a moment to think. They realized that Kim looked exactly like Lee Junhook, his pseudonym. While Kim tried to rearrange his hair slightly to maybe get out of this situation, one of the women turned back to the class and asked another girl if she was right, seeking confirmation. But the girl said that he didn't really look like his pro-gamer pseudonym, while one of his male classmates noticed a resemblance. The pretty redhead classmate who had just claimed he didn't look similar then mentioned that she had the same glasses as his pro-gamer pseudonym and asked him to try them on to compare better. Kim did this, and his classmates told him that he couldn't lie to his fans' eyes, and they realized that he and his pseudonym looked remarkably alike. His classmates were astonished and couldn't believe it. Some girls cheered, and a few male classmates recognized that they not only looked similar but were one and the same person, which naturally led to loud chatter in the class. The hearts of his female fans raced with excitement. They could hardly believe that they attended the same school and class as their idol and were surprised to discover that Lee Junhook was hiding behind the persona of Kim Jun-sung. Subsequently, everyone accompanied him, pestering him by expressing their plans to follow all his games or asking if he would play a game with them. Exhausted, he went to the school rooftop, seeking some peace from the classmates who had gotten on his nerves since they discovered his true identity. He sat down and pondered that he had actually wanted a quiet life and hadn't intended to make his pro-gamer career so public. The reason he wanted to keep his identity secret and become a pro-gamer with a pseudonym was that he wanted to save money quickly and didn't want too much attention. Suddenly, Shoes appeared in front of him, and his classmate with yellow hair stood before him, apologizing and saying that it was all her fault, and she hadn't expected the situation with his headband to escalate like that. Kim reassured her that everything was okay and she shouldn't blame herself but rather Mitschiller and Miji, who had set the whole event in motion. His classmate asked for something else besides the apology and requested a romantic date with him. Kim was already looking forward to the meal and thought that his life would finally take a turn for the better. He imagined the delicious food in his mind. However, in the end, it was futile, and he got hit by a truck Kuan. He had fought so hard to survive and lead a happy life and couldn't have foreseen that it would end in such a tragic way. At the end of his life, one thing came to his mind: in his next life, he wanted to be reborn as a wealthy person and lead a happy life. He wondered if his desperate plea had been heard. Not long after his birth, he realized he was reborn in a new world. At the age of 4, Elle read the books he found in the library and learned that he was born into a world with a feudal system similar to the Middle Ages, where there were ranks, classes, and noble titles. Elle sat once again under a tree in a shady spot, reading one of his many books, when his mother looked out of the window and told him to stop and come inside as the food was ready, and he must be hungry. It was another sunny day, and the sun shone on their cozy house. Elle was fascinated that this world had magicians who could use magic, knights who mastered aura, and priests who wielded the power of divine magic. There were so many fascinating things to discover in this world. However, Elle believed that the best part of this world in his current life was having a loving mother who cared for him. Moreover, he knew that his mother was a magician who had reached the 3rd level of magic at a young age. Elle's mother had lost her husband early on, which made her cherish and love her son even more. To meet her expectations, Elle trained diligently. As the magic formulas in this world were similar to mathematics, and he excelled in math in his previous life, he already mastered the 2nd level of magic within 7 years. Despite his limited mana, he expected no problem reaching the 3rd level in 3 years. Looking out of the window, Elle saw his mother receiving a basket of leaves from an older man. He knew it was the one day each month when his mother went to the large village to sell Rosito tea leaves. His mother knocked on Elle's bedroom door and informed him that she would be heading to the village. She wondered what he was doing in his room and if he might be asleep. Announcing her entry, she opened the door. Elle had also prepared himself and expressed his desire to accompany his mother. He wore a white coat and had a small bag with him. Elle's mother looked at him with her big blue eyes, amazed at how adorable her son was. It took her a moment to realize what Elle intended, and she shook her head. She didn't want her son to expose himself to such danger. She feared that a dangerous monster might appear on the way to the village and attack her beloved son. In her mind, the image of an orc with red eyes, a pig-like nose, a drooling tongue, white hair, 2 horns, and long, unkempt fingernails emerged. Elle felt a bit down as he considered that his mother always had to walk this path alone, and he thought about not having told her yet that he could also use magic. He wanted to learn more about magic quickly and advance to the next magic class. Reaching the 5th class would earn him the title of Count appointed by the king, treated accordingly. If he managed to go further and reach the 7th class, he would be considered one of the strongest magicians and could lead a very prosperous life. Elle's goal was to become the strongest and, above all, the richest magician on the continent and lead a happy life with his mother. But first, he had to start small. He pleaded with his blue eyes and tried to act like a normal little child. He said he could protect her. His mother was deeply moved by his cuteness and had to give in since Elle was so sweet. However, to be allowed to come along, Elle had to promise to listen to her and under no circumstances do anything dangerous. Elle enthusiastically agreed and assured his mother that he would abide by these rules. His mother told him that she would protect him under any circumstances if a dangerous monster were to appear, and he could trust her. Overjoyed to have such a caring mother, he assured her that he had already been doing so and would entrust his life to her. Elle and his mother walked along a narrow, small path with occasional small stones. The sun was shining, and a forest lay ahead of them. At the end of the horizon, they could already glimpse the mountains. His mother turned to him and asked if he was tired, as several hours had passed since they left the house and set out on their journey. Elle told her that he was okay and that he had trained hard before, so a little walk didn't bother him. His mother agreed and admitted that he had not only been observing the magicians but had also been diligently training. Elle explained that aspiring great magicians needed a healthy body and a healthy mind, so one should start training their body rigorously at an early age. His mother realized that those were the same words taught by the Magician Academy about strengthening the physical body. She praised him and told him he was very clever and would definitely become a great magician. On the edge of the path, Elle picked a flower and showed his mother that they could use it to heal wounds and use it as a medicinal herb. She agreed and praised him again for how smart he was and how proud she was of him. As they continued on their way to the village, they passed by a small place with a bench and a table where they could take a little break and rest. Elle's mother told him that she had created and placed those benches and the table when she passed by this area before. Elle was delighted and found this little resting spot truly fantastic. His mother asked him if he liked this place, to which Elle responded affirmatively. Suddenly, he noticed something and pointed with his finger in a direction. He told his mother that something was there. 3 orcs appeared and said they could smell humans and were looking forward to devouring them. Elle's mother also noticed that the orcs were approaching them and immediately stood protectively in front of Elle. She was somewhat shocked that 3 orcs were coming towards them at once. She worried that her son might be overwhelmed and frightened during this first encounter and could potentially be traumatized by it. The orcs stood directly in front of Elle and his mother, pointing at them. They were already eager for their meal and were hungry as they hadn't eaten for a while. One of them prepared for a fight and twirled his weapon around, creating a small gust of wind. Elle's mother recoiled slightly and quickly turned to Elle, intending to eliminate the orcs swiftly as she feared Elle might panic. However, Elle stood calmly beside her and fearlessly asked if what they were seeing was an orc, comparing them to pigs. The orcs were not pleased, instead, they were angry and somewhat bewildered, just like Elle's mother, who noticed that he remained remarkably calm given the situation. The orcs grew even angrier and screamed through the forest, claiming that they did not look like pigs. In response, Elle's mother focused on the fight, extending her hands forward and channeling some mana in them, creating a small flame that quickly grew larger. She agreed with Elle that there was no reason to be afraid and promised him that the orcs would not come near them. The flame continued to grow, forming into a large fireball. Elle's mother looked confident and strong, calling forth her magic, saying, "Fireball." Elle was quite amazed when he saw his mother's magic and realized that this fireball spell was a class 3 magic. The fireball grew larger and flew towards the orcs, engulfing them in flames. Elle's mother couldn't help but laugh when he repeated his son's words about the orcs looking like green pigs. The orcs lay on the ground in pain, realizing that the fire magic was quite terrifying, and they better run away. And so, they promptly fled, running for their lives. Elle was astonished and praised his mother for being strong and cool. She wanted to hear more compliments from him and asked him to say it again since she didn't quite understand him earlier. He repeated once more that she was a cool and amazing magician. His mother was very happy to receive such a nice compliment and felt a bit embarrassed. While his mother set the food on the wooden table, they continued their well-deserved break. She asked Elle why he wasn't afraid of the orcs. He explained that they looked like green pigs, and he had no reason to be afraid as they appeared quite funny. His mother explained that the orcs ran away because of the fire magic and their fear of it. She also warned him that there were even scarier monsters out there, so he should continue to be cautious as they moved forward. Elle listened attentively to his mother's advice but also enjoyed a delicious sandwich she had prepared for him before they left. She also informed him that there might be trolls nearby, known for their great regenerative abilities, making them difficult to defeat. Besides trolls, there were also ogres, rumored to be as strong and sturdy as castle walls. Elle asked his mother if she could easily defeat these types of monsters, and she confidently confirmed. She provided Elle with more information, such as the value of troll blood as a valuable potion ingredient due to its regenerative properties. As for ogres, their leather was highly valuable but challenging to obtain due to their strength. Elle's mind started to picture the potential earnings he could make from these materials. His mother cautioned that these monsters were rare and not easily found. But he should still be cautious. Elle, still enthusiastic about the money he could potentially earn, assured his mother that he would be careful. She touched her son's nose with a finger and playfully booped it, assuring him that she would always protect him, and he didn't need to be afraid because she would be there for him. She mentioned that their destination was a city called Bangkok, and it would take about 3 more days to get there. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and asked if he could hold out that long. Elle confidently said he could indeed endure it and that she shouldn't worry because he was strong. His mother praised him and thought he was cool. So, the two of them continued on their way towards Bangkok. During the night, they made a small fire and told each other stories. During the day, they leaped over obstacles like logs, stones, and rivers, enjoying their mother-son time together. The 3 days passed quickly, and as the sun rose over the mountains on the horizon, they could already see the city of Bangkok from a hill. Elle and his mother looked down from the hill at the city, and Elle was glad to have finally arrived. He gazed at the place where he wanted to take his first steps towards becoming a prosperous person. Excitedly, he looked down and beamed with happiness alongside his mother. Together, they entered the city, and for the first time, Elle felt as if he had been reborn into a different world. In front of him was a small, majestic fountain, and a little further ahead of the fountain stood a larger, round building with white and blue accents and a horse as its emblem. People were bustling all around the city, also appearing genuinely content. Elle looked around with excitement and couldn't stop marveling at everything. His mother reminded him to look straight ahead while walking and led him in the direction they needed to go. They arrived at a shop with a green roof, similar to their house. The store had a cozy ambience and bore the name Dibble Store. Its owner was a blond man with green eyes, coincidentally named Dibble. He looked cheerful, greeted Elle and his mother, and mentioned that he had been expecting them. Elle's mother replied that it had been a while and that she was also delighted to see him again. Elle peeked shyly from behind his mother and formed his first impression of the shop owner. Dibble looked past Elle's mother and asked who the little man behind her was. She hugged her son and introduced him as her son, her little reliable companion. Furthermore, she showered him with compliments, praising how smart and adorable her son was. Elle felt a bit uncomfortable being suddenly pulled into her arms. Dibble bent down slightly to get a closer look at Elle and said he was very pleased to meet him. He also mentioned that he had heard a lot about him and how brilliant he was. Suddenly, something clicked for Dibble as he observed Elle. Dibble looked into Elle's eyes and noticed that the color of his eyes was somewhat different from other children his age. Dibble felt as if Elle's gaze was assessing him and seeing only money. Elle's mother called Dibble's name, snapping him back to reality as he looked up again. Dibble apologized for being somewhat rude and lost in thought for a moment. He praised Elle's mother for having such a wonderful son. Elle's mother put her backpack on the ground and opened it, revealing many small green tea leaves that shone and sparkled. The quality of these leaves was exceptionally good for this time of year. Dibble took the backpack and examined the leaves closely. He remarked that the quality was truly astonishing and that he hadn't expected such high quality. He offered 5 more gold coins than the last time he bought from her. He also mentioned that currently, nobody else could sell such high-quality leaves as hardly anyone could achieve this level of excellence. Elle's mother admitted that she actually had no idea about tea leaves but thanked Dibble for his generosity. While Elle enthusiastically examined the books in Dibble's store, Dibble explained to his mother that nowadays he was more profitable thanks to her. He emphasized that they both benefited from each other and she need not worry if he paid her a little more sometimes. Elle picked up a book and pretended to read it but continued to observe the interaction between Dibble and his mother. He noticed that Dibble knew exactly how to assess the products he purchased and how to speak with his customers to build a good rapport with them. Elle also wanted to establish a connection with a store and realized that this store would be perfect for that purpose. His mother said her goodbyes, telling Dibble that she would see him next time. She asked her son, Elle, to accompany her, and he put away his book, saying he would come along. Dibble sat down in his chair and pondered. He thought about Elle and his eyes and how he would become a great person in the future. Elle and his mother continued through the city, and Elle asked where they were going next. His mother held up a small bag and explained that they were now on their way to the mage tower to sell small mana stones engraved with runes. Mana stones allowed anyone to use magic effortlessly, but these stones could only be used once. Their production was challenging, hence their high price. Elle immediately thought about how he could simplify the process of creating these mana stones with his improved magic techniques. However, he also had to consider that the materials were very expensive, and he didn't dare to try it himself. While contemplating what he wanted to do next, his mother told him that the mage tower was known for selling grimoires and various other materials. Elle snapped out of his thoughts and asked his mother if he heard correctly, if he could buy grimoires there in the tower. In the mage tower, it was possible to buy grimoires of higher classes that were not readily available in the village. There were even grimoires of the 9th and 10th class, although no mage on the continent had ever reached the 10th class. Elle was shocked to hear that there were books of the 9th and even 10th class there. Usually, he wanted to grow up quickly and lead a happy life with his mother, but now his plans had slightly changed. He told his mother that he would like to buy books of the 8th and 9th classes at the mage tower, and his mother began to laugh and praised him for always working so hard. It didn't take long until they arrived at the mage tower in Banzark. The vice master of the tower warmly greeted Elle's mother and him. The vice master wore several golden rings on his hand and a purple robe. Elle's mother bowed and greeted him as well, while Elle wondered who this man might be. The vice master explained that he had been wondering when they would arrive and that he had been expecting them. Elle's mother handed him an engraved mana stone, which the vice master examined closely. He praised Elle's improved skills and was impressed with the quality of the offered stone. She thanked him for the compliment. Elle attentively watched the vice master inspecting the stone. When the vice master noticed that Elle was listening, he asked who the child was, grabbed Elle by both cheeks, and almost squeezed his face together. He realized that Elle was his mother's son and understood why he looked so good. Elle didn't look very happy and didn't want to be touched by the vice master. Finally, the vice master decided to let go of Elle, introduced his own son, and called him Cedric. Cedric turned around, wearing a small cap and red clothing. The vice master mentioned that Cedric was 12 years old and had already mastered the first level of magic. He was visibly proud of this fact. Elle's mother also expressed excitement and remarked that it was amazing, as strangers often say to not offend their children. The vice master asked Cedric to demonstrate his magic and use a spell called Energy Ball. Cedric reluctantly performed the spell, but he visibly struggled to conjure something in his hand and had to exert a lot of effort. Nonetheless, Elle's mother was impressed and said she was looking forward to the future, believing that Cedric had a great destiny ahead. Suddenly, the vice master began making inappropriate advances towards Elle's mother. He said that if she submitted to him, he could teach her son the same things and that Elle could achieve the same as Cedric. Of course, she rejected this inappropriate offer. After being turned down, the vice master said she shouldn't take it so seriously and that it was just a joke, like someone does when they face rejection. Elle became angry that someone was making advances towards his loving mother and couldn't accept her rejection. Originally, Elle hadn't planned to showcase his abilities until he turned 10 years old. But under these circumstances, he couldn't hold back any longer. He declared that he was capable of doing the same thing Cedric had just demonstrated, which surprised everyone and turned their attention to Elle. Shocked, Elle's mother, the vice master, and Cedric looked at him. Elle's mother asked him what he meant by that and urged him not to lie and explain why he would say such a thing. Suddenly, a strong mana gathered around him. He stretched out his hand and cast the same energy bolt spell Cedric had shown earlier. But unlike Cedric, Elle wasn't as exhausted, and his energy bolt absorbed more and more mana from outside the tower, significantly enhancing his spell, making it larger. In control, Elle then halted the spell, astonishing the vice master and scaring Cedric. Elle's mother sat shocked on the floor, unable to believe what she had just seen. She immediately got up, hugged her son, and said he was the best. She asked him when he had learned it and how cool he was, showering him with many compliments. Suddenly, the two of them heard something and fell silent for a moment. Another person opened the room and entered, where all the other participants were present. This person asked loudly who had just cast and demonstrated that magic. The vice master explained that it was the tower master. Elle was astonished that this old man was the master of the tower. He sensed the incredible amount of mana surrounding the tower master and realized that this was the strength of a 7th class mage. The tower master looked down at Elle and asked if he was the one who had just cast the magic. He referred to Elle as an odd little rascal, as his eyes were not typical for a child his age. Elle asked what the tower master meant by that. The tower master explained that a wise man could see the inner self of a person just through their eyes. Elle pondered over these words, the inner self of a person. Then, the tower master turned to Elle's mother and asked if she was the one who had brought him. She bowed and confirmed it. The tower master then said he would borrow her son briefly and disappeared with Elle into another room above the tower. Both sat at a table in the midst of a large library in the master's private chambers. The tower master wanted to get straight to the point and explained that the magic Elle had just cast corresponded to the 1st class. However, he also recognized that Elle's mana response was at higher classes. Furthermore, he noticed that the casting time was extremely short and asked how Elle had achieved it. The tower master explained that the 7th class of magic was comparable to a swordsman but had to admit that magic during a battlefield fight was limited. Elle listened intently, and the master continued, explaining that mages would be helpless and quickly die if a knight was fast enough. Then he asked Elle if he would reveal his method to possibly prevent this. Elle grinned and asked the master if he thought he was an idiot. Laughing, he asked him if he would simply divulge such a significant secret technique he possessed without getting something in return. The master stroked his long beard and said that Elle was a cheeky child but considered what an appropriate payment might be. El folded his hands in front of his face and asked eagerly if the master had already thought of something he might like. The tower master told him that he would give him 10,000 gold pieces, which should be enough for even his descendants to live on. However, El didn't want such a large sum as he currently didn't need it. Instead, he wished for help here and there and, therefore, declined the tower master's offer. He said that he would prefer books of the 8th and 9th class and also a few mana stones, as that would be sufficient for him. The tower master was surprised that the mana stones would suffice and asked if El was serious. El confirmed this and explained that this was what he needed the most at the moment. The master considered what El could be planning to do with the mana stones, and while he didn't know exactly, he recognized that there must be a reason for it. Therefore, he agreed and prepared 100 mana stones along with the books. They shook hands and confirmed the deal with each other. El thanked him with a smile and affectionately called the tower master Grandpa. He was a little surprised and called El a clever fox as a large amount of mana swirled around them. The tower master wondered why it was so difficult to deal with a young child who was only 7 years old and noted that it felt more like he was talking to a great mage. El looked up at the tower master, listened to him, and couldn't help but laugh when he said he was talking to a great mage. El placed a finger on his lips and asked the tower master to keep everything he had seen today a secret. When El and his mother returned home, she asked him where he had learned that magic and how he had learned to cast it so quickly. El explained that he had learned the magic using magic books at home and, additionally, through mana response training. He had also developed his own formula to cast spells faster. In his previous life, he had used the time after work, when he was supposed to sleep, to study because he didn't just want to go to a good college but to lead a better life. Of all the things he had studied back then, he had enjoyed mathematics the most because it was something concrete, and he found joy in solving difficult problems and feeling satisfaction afterward. However, magic formulas were much more challenging than math problems. At that time, he had been able to reduce the casting time with the acquired knowledge. But since he couldn't teach his mother Earth mathematics, he had to teach her a modified method that was still very effective. She was amazed at how quickly the spell casting time could be reduced without losing strength. El's mother hugged him and asked him to teach her even more so she could become an excellent magician. Thus, 2 more years passed, and his mother became a 4th-class magician. They had also moved closer to the magician tower in Banzark. One day, as they were heading to the magician tower as usual, they had an unusual encounter. They saw a group of people in black robes, leading 2 girls on chains. One of the girls had white hair, and the other had red hair. They overheard one of them saying that today was a good day because they had captured 2 at once. Both girls wore metal collars around their necks with chains attached. One of the men, holding one of the chains, became impatient and struck the white-haired girl. Suddenly, a stone flew from behind and hit the man who had just tried to hit the young white-haired girl on the back of the head. Angrily, El and his mother stood there, and El asked what they planned to do and ordered them to stop immediately. The men in the robes asked who they were and told them to stop interfering in their work. However, El's mother was not one to simply walk away after witnessing something like that. Both girls wore simple brown garments, and the red-haired girl looked desperate as she touched the white-haired girl lying on the ground and anxiously checked on her condition, tears in her eyes. El's mother gently touched his shoulder and asked him to move aside for a moment. She realized that words wouldn't help in such a situation and cast her fireball spell. This made El happy, so he supported his mother and also fired his energy bolt, which drove the men in black robes away. They freed the 2 girls and asked if they were okay. El's mother couldn't understand why someone would do such a thing. El reached out his hand to the 2 girls lying on the ground and assured them that everything would be fine now. The girls looked at El's hand in disbelief and couldn't believe their luck. Tears filled their eyes, and they grabbed El's hand. At first, they wanted to find their families, but when El and his mother learned that the 2 had nowhere to go back to, they decided to take them in. And so, the rest of the 2 years passed, and the everyday life with El, his two new sisters, and his mother settled into a regular routine. The sun rose, and their new house glowed in the morning sun rays. El was still comfortably asleep in his bed. Over the past years, his hair had grown a bit longer, and the sun rays from outside streamed into his room, gently touching his face. The door to his room opened, and the white-haired girl they had adopted quietly entered the room, calling his name to check if he was awake. She raised her hands and conjured a small golden bird on her palms with her magic, lovingly urging El to get up. The golden bird then took flight in the air, slowly soaring higher through El's room, leaving behind its warm feathers. The feathers gently brushed El, and he slowly woke up, cocooned in the warm sun rays and the warmth of the golden bird. El sat up, stretching and yawning, fully waking up. He noticed that his white-haired sister Serena was also in the room, having woken him up. He praised her for her impressive progress in magic in such a short time, particularly admiring her recent wind magic spell. He asked her if she wasn't exhausted from spending the whole day observing and learning magic from him. Serena explained that it had been challenging at first, but once she realized that magic was enjoyable and she took pleasure in learning new spells, it became much easier and less tiring. Especially now that she had found a rhythm. Serena then turned around and suggested that El should come downstairs. El agreed and made his way downstairs. Serena was already waiting with a tray and a cup in hand. El looked around and asked about his other adopted sister, Kana, and if she was outside again. Serena confirmed that Kana was indeed outside and had been going out in the mornings lately. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and Kana stood in the entryway, holding a sword in her hand, peering into the cozy home. She asked her new brother El if he had slept well, to which he wished her a good morning and praised her incredible patience and endurance during their sword training. Kana looked down at her sword and explained that she had done just that because she felt that the more she swung her sword, the better she would become and the more progress she would make. Moreover, she thoroughly enjoyed the training. She took up a combat position and suggested that they could have a practice fight to personally demonstrate her progress. However, El explained that he would rather see it next time when they were outside and not fight inside the house. El, Serena, and Kana were all of a similar age, with El being the oldest and Serena 2 years younger. They had been isolated from the outside world from a very young age, making it challenging for El and his mother to teach them everything. Nonetheless, they had succeeded, and now both Serena and Kana had their lives well under control, having adapted well to their current life. El had mainly tutored the two of them. Serena possessed a great talent in magic and had already reached the first class. Kana, on the other hand, showed exceptional talent in athletics and was primarily taught swordsmanship. The result of their diverse training was that they complemented each other, balancing their strengths and weaknesses. As El looked at the two of them, he felt immensely proud of their rapid and positive development and of what he had taught them in such a short time. Suddenly, El's mother appeared and greeted her children with a cheerful, "Good morning." Her good mood was evident. As she passed by El, humming happily, he realized that something special must have happened. She turned around and asked her son if it wasn't obvious to him, showing him the peace sign with great pride and explaining that she had mastered the 5th level of magic yesterday. El was astonished and happy for his mother. And Serena and Kana also congratulated their new mother, addressing her directly as "Mother." El's mother was deeply moved by this and thanked everyone for their well wishes. El contemplated how to appropriately celebrate this event, and all three women looked at him inquisitively. However, he already had an idea and turned around. The evening gradually approached its end, and the sunset bathed the entire city of Bangkok in a beautiful violet light. Even the mage tower glowed in the lilac brilliance of the sunset. The old tower master was astonished by El's appearance and how much he had grown in the last 2 years. He noticed that it had been impolite and made him appear unsympathetic that El had only reappeared now. While El's mother and sisters were still climbing through a portal, El explained that he had come personally to him for this reason. He also asked the tower master if it was true that he had defeated a sword master in combat, and he realized that the tower master was continually becoming stronger. The tower master confirmed this and invited El and his companions to take a seat at the table. El took one of the chairs, while his mother stood behind him and asked her own son why they were suddenly going to the mage tower and if there was a reason for it. The tower master was also curious and asked El why he had come so unexpectedly. El explained that he wanted to show his new innovation and poured a few red magic stones from his bag onto the table, each of which had a small magical inscription. The tower master took one of these stones, which at first glance looked like ordinary mana stones, but he recognized that they were actually magic stones, one of the most challenging things to find on the entire continent. Furthermore, he realized that this meant that El was the inventor of these stones. A magic stone held almost as much mana as a high-ranking mana stone. However, the difference lay in the fact that these magic stones could be easily recharged within 3 days after being used once, and they could be used 10 times. In contrast, conventional mana stones had to wait for several years before they could be used again. The tower master also explained that many people from other mage towers were sent, which had resulted in recent reports of unusual individuals lurking around El's new house. El's mother asked her son if it was true, to which he confirmed that it was, but fortunately, those people hadn't dared to take further action. Additionally, El thought that these stones would also interest the tower master. The tower master's eyes widened briefly, but then he realized that El was still a child, even though he behaved like an adult, and he asked what El wanted. El raised his hand and said that he had 4 things he wanted in exchange for handing over the production and sales rights of the magic stones to the mage tower. Firstly, he wanted to ensure the safety of him and his family. This would be easy since other Majorterm would learn that this tower held the rights, causing those people lurking around their house to simply give up and disappear. The tower master agreed and recognized that he was probably right. Secondly, El wanted sword and magic books, thinking about his 2 sisters and how excellent they were and how they needed new books. The tower master also agreed to this and told them that he had countless books, so they could take whatever they wanted. He asked what other conditions El had in mind. El told him that he wanted the tower master to show him a good inn, which puzzled the tower master. El explained that his mother had reached the 5th level of magic, and he wanted to celebrate that. The fact that El wanted to see a good inn and gave up one of the conditions he could have had for the magic stones astonished his family. Furthermore, he expressed his wish to have a luxurious vacation with his family, without anyone else accompanying them. His mother was moved to tears and embraced him, calling him such a good son and thanking him. His sisters also joined in the hug, and El realized that he wanted to protect this place, whatever might happen. The tower master reluctantly interrupted the heartfelt hug of the family but was curious about the 4th condition El wanted. El became more serious and squinted his eyes. He said that he wanted a book that contained instructions to create a golem, essentially a golem-making book. The tower master repeated El's words, shocked, and asked him why he would need a golem and if he didn't know that even with a blueprint, he couldn't create one. El just chuckled at these 2 questions and said that he was merely interested. In reality, he had a different purpose for needing a golem. For more years passed. The moon shone in the sky, and it was another clear, starry night. 2 male figures stood in front of El's house, knowing that it belonged to the inventor of the magic stones. They explored the surroundings and discovered that there were no magic traps set around the house. They thought that the residents of this house in the city of Bangkok, along with their magic tower, were perhaps too trusting and had neglected their defenses. They hid behind a narrow hedge and discussed their further plans. One of the men initially believed that the mission would be difficult, as they were supposed to capture the inhabitants alive and unharmed. However, now that they had observed no defensive spells, he thought it would be a straightforward task. The other man asked what would happen if the residents resisted. In response, his comrade drew his sword, making it clear that it wouldn't end well in such a case. He stated that he would kill them all like assassins, regardless of the mission's objective, and his face bore an intense warning expression. Suddenly, El appeared before them, stating that it was a good idea, leaving the two observers shocked. Before they could react, they noticed something behind them and turned around. They saw several armored golems already surrounding them. Panicked, one of the attackers jumped up and screamed, attacking one of the golems with his sword. The golem remained unfazed, and the sword shattered into smaller pieces upon impact. The man looked down at his broken blade, realizing he was in a hopeless situation. His friend also observed the failed attack and recognized the dire circumstances. In desperation, one of the attackers fell to his knees, and both wondered how such an overwhelming defense force in the form of these combat golems could be standing in their way. The golems took care of the attackers, removing their bodies from the house. El praised the golems for their performance and watched as one of them carried the bodies away. He then turned to the other two and realized that his golems, even in their unfinished state, were relatively strong and agile. He briefly remembered when he had requested the golem-making book from the Tower Master in the past, retreating to the workshop to focus entirely on golem production. He also recognized that these golems were more suitable for defense and could already handle individual tasks well, but seeing the blood on the floor made him aware that they were still a bit far from perfection. El raised his hand and performed some magic, creating a blue magic circle around him, lifting and vanishing the blood on the floor. He shook his hand slightly, stating that it should be enough, as he didn't want his mother or his sisters to notice anything. His sister was busy preparing some eggs in the pan, getting breakfast ready. She greeted El, who thanked her for making breakfast. As El leaned on the counter, Serena said it was no problem and that she enjoyed cooking. Kana also greeted them, and both El and Serena turned to look at her. They greeted her too and asked if she had just returned from training. Kana, just like 4 years ago, got ready for a fight, grasping her sword and asking if El wanted to see her progress. He said he would like to see it later, but it wasn't the right time now. El was glad that both of them hadn't changed over the years, but he looked around, wondering where his mother was. Suddenly, he and Serena noticed something. El's mother lifted a small flame in one of her hands and then raised another hand, transforming the small flame into a larger fireball. She realized the fire was getting out of control and tried to regain control before it disappeared. However, she couldn't manage it, and the fireball returned to its initial small flame, causing her to fall to the ground from exhaustion. Suddenly, El's mother heard El's voice, and she was somewhat surprised by where it was coming from. She looked up and recognized her children standing before her, informing her that breakfast was ready and that they wanted to have breakfast together. El's mother apologized and said she wanted to do some more training first. However, El told her that, despite the training, she needed to pay attention to eating properly to become stronger and avoid overworking herself. He also praised her, saying she was incredible. However, El's mother disagreed, stating it wasn't true and expressing her desire to quickly rise to the level of a 6th-class mage. When El told her she didn't have to work so hard, she turned around, interrupted him, and tearfully insisted that she had to. El was shocked and wondered why his mother suddenly acted this way. He realized that his mother wasn't behaving normally and wondered if something had happened. He recalled a technique he had used in his previous life to increase his focus. Although he had intended to keep it hidden from his mother and sisters, he realized he couldn't do so any longer. He told his family, who looked puzzled, that he would show them the hypogastric breathing technique. El explained the hypogastric breathing technique to his family, instructing them to concentrate on a pressure point a few inches below their navel. They were to inhale through their nose and exhale all the air in their body through their mouth. By mastering this technique, they could gather their energy at a single point and increase their strength. The 3 women tried the technique immediately, synchronizing their breathing. Serena turned red and had to stop first, saying she couldn't breathe under these circumstances. El advised her not to overdo it and take it slowly by breathing calmly and steadily. Kana followed next but also had to give up. holding her stomach and saying her abdominal muscles were cramping permanently. Elle corrected her mistake, stating that she was breathing too forcefully and using too much force. Both of them lay exhausted on the floor after completing the breathing training. Serena said that she usually didn't pay much attention to her breathing and admitted that this method was very challenging to learn. Kana agreed with her, stating that the human body and its techniques were a mystery to her, and this technique was also difficult to master. Elle's mother was still standing there, breathing calmly in and out. A bright blue manna surrounded her. Elle, Serena, and Kana looked at their mother in astonishment, fascinated that she still had an incredible focus. Elle realized that nearby manna was gathering around his mother, and she felt her senses improving. She, too, could feel the manna slowly enveloping her, and her magic kept growing stronger. It was something she had never felt before. Suddenly, she thought about how her son, Elle, had discovered and developed all of this on his own, without the help of others. It reaffirmed her belief that he was a genius. That's why she wanted to become stronger, to create a better environment for Elle and return to a specific place that looked like a large, beautiful estate. Elle's mother suddenly opened her eyes, and the manna now gathered even more around her. It flowed slowly into her body, giving her an incredible strength unlike before. She raised her hand again and tried once more. This time, she started with a small flame, but it was much more powerful than her first attempt. She intensified the flame and effortlessly controlled a massive fireball with just one hand. Elle and his sisters continued to watch their mother's experiments, and when she transformed the fireball into various animal forms, they were even more amazed. They congratulated their mother. Serena told her that she could feel her mana had become stronger and that she had accomplished an incredible transformation. She wiped the tears from her face and said that she could definitely reach the 6th class now. She thanked her children, explaining that she had made these advancements thanks to them. Elle was happy to see his mother smile again and look happy. He wondered if he could find another clue to help his mother reach the next level. However, for his main goal, he needed to figure out how to awaken a night golem. His mind was filled with thoughts of how to achieve this goal. He wondered if he had recognized and not ignored the change in his mother earlier, and if he had been attentive and communicated with her back then, whether it would have been possible to continue living peacefully. As Elle got lost in these thoughts, he saw the faces of his sisters Serena, Kana, and his weeping mother. His sisters embraced their mother, while Elle stood apart, deep in thought. His mother apologized to her children for holding them up all morning and only now could they eat together. Kana reassured her that it was okay and she shouldn't dwell on it. Serena also told her it was fine and what mattered more was how amazing it was that she had advanced a class. Elle's mother had tears in her eyes as she expressed her gratitude for her children being so kind and understanding. However, she couldn't help but wonder why her biological son, Elle, finished his meal and immediately retreated to his room, leaving her alone. She felt sad that Elle spent all his time locked in his research lab, working alone, and she couldn't even say anything about it. Serena and Kana didn't know what to say to their mother. Elle sat alone in his research lab, surrounded by several books and papers. He held his head in his hand, visibly pondering the fact that creating the continent's strongest golem wasn't as easy as he thought. He knew he wanted to create a golem capable of independent thinking and action. To do this, he needed to create an ego, but that wasn't an easy task. Thought magic was on the 8th level of a mage's skill, and it was known to be one of the most challenging magic arts. Elle lay back on the floor and held a book in his hand. He understood the knowledge theoretically but couldn't apply it practically, even though he was now a 6th class mage. He wondered if it would work once he reached the 7th class. But he knew that wouldn't happen anytime soon. If he couldn't attain the enlightenment of the 7th class, he couldn't master it either. So he asked himself how he could achieve this enlightenment. He remembered when his mother had used hypogastric breath for the first time and created a fireball from it. He wondered if he had missed something important during his own development that could support him in this process. Suddenly, his sister entered his room and apologized for disturbing him while he was so focused. However, she reminded El that it was time for him to oversee her training and asked if he could come. El quickly stood up and said he would come right away to monitor her training. As he walked to the door with her, he asked if that was what she had asked him about earlier, as she was having some problems. Serena confirmed it and explained that she was currently struggling with the basics, apologizing for needing his help with something so simple. She told El that she didn't understand the nature of mana, which puzzled him. He asked her if she could feel the mana, how it reacted, and how it permeated her entire body. Serena said that she did feel something similar, but it wasn't her main concern. She wasn't sure how to explain it properly. She placed her hand on her body and tried to explain to El that she meant more the temperament of the mana. She sensed a variety of different types of mana that seemed to blend together within her. And she couldn't decipher their differences, let alone their powers and characteristics. She wondered if El could possibly help her understand what she was feeling. El was amazed as he listened to his sister's description. He too began to wonder about the nature of mana and its properties. He asked, mana properties, while contemplating Serena's feelings and whether he had ever experienced something similar. El turned around and went to a small box on his desk, rummaging through it until a few blue mana stones spilled out. He placed one of his hands over the stones, closed his eyes, and used some of his magic. He noticed that each stone had distinct properties, not just one or two. But every single one had its own set of qualities that mixed together to form a type of mana. Excitedly, he looked up and wondered how he could have overlooked something so fundamental, considering that mana had various attributes. He moved his hand to his body, eager to learn more and experiment. He once again channeled his magic, and when he opened his eyes, he was utterly amazed. He saw a starry sea-like landscape in his mind. He recalled a revelation he had in a game he played in his past life, where understanding the properties of each unit during a raid was crucial. By grasping these attributes, he could utilize their strengths perfectly, creating powerful combinations with other traits. It had been his specialty at the time. He realized that the same principle applied to mana as it did to the units in that game. He recognized that he should be capable of crafting potent magic depending on how he combined the individual properties. Lost in thought and completely ignoring his sister, he mumbled to himself that he needed to try it out immediately. Serena was somewhat puzzled and wondered what he meant by that. El extended his hand again and once more channeled his magic. A magical circle appeared beneath his hand, and the mana stones began to levitate, emitting a soft glow corresponding to their attributes. Slowly, the different properties of the mana stones started to attract one another. And they converged at a single point. Now, El raised his other hand, intending to merge the mana stones together. However, it proved more challenging than he anticipated, and he visibly strained to maintain control. He realized that if he continued in this manner, the uncontrolled power of his unfinished spell would rebound on him. He needed to calm himself and apply hypogastric breath to regain control. El knew that reaching the 7th grade wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to give his best for his ultimate goal and would put forth everything in his attempt to achieve it. Suddenly, his spell broke, and the mana crystals floated aimlessly. El collapsed to the ground and was momentarily knocked out. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Serena's small golden bird. Reflexively, he slowly reached out to catch it. Serena repeatedly called her brother's name, hoping he would wake up. Eventually, El opened his eyes and saw his sister's tearful face above him, asking if he was all right. Rubbing his face to clear his head, he asked why he was lying on the ground. She explained that the wind had gathered around him, causing him to collapse. She had been very worried as he was lying motionless and unresponsive. Serena asked again if he was really okay. El had fully regained his composure and assured her that everything was all right. He informed her of the more important news that, thanks to her help, he had managed to become a 7th grade mage. Only because she made him aware of feeling different types of mana, he was able to combine them to fill in the missing piece. El thanked his sister. Serena looked at her brother with fascination, unable to believe that his class had increased because of her seemingly trivial question. She had to admit that her brother was truly remarkable and worked very hard. El already had the next book in hand and was reading again. Serena approached him once more, curious about what level of magic he had mastered. As she looked into his eyes, she felt a magical power from him that was even greater than their mother's. El asked her to keep it as a secret and not tell anyone about what she could feel, without revealing the exact class. Serena understood that it must be about a pretty high class, which astonished her even more. Now that El had reached the 7th grade, he knew he could proceed with his plans to create a golem that could think and act independently. He was now much closer to achieving his goal of creating the strongest night golem on the continent. El's mother sat on a small rock on the hill in front of their house, looking down at her home. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and realized it was a beautiful and peaceful spot where they had spent some lovely times together. However, she couldn't help but think that they might have to leave this place soon. She held a small pendant in her hand and looked at a picture inside it. With tears in her eyes, she addressed the image of her husband, Rian, in the locket, asking him to continue watching over their son, El, as he would soon turn 17, and she had to make a decision for him. Fully focused, El was carefully portioning something, sprinkling smaller particles from his hand. Serena watched the whole spectacle, holding her breath in anticipation. She was also curious to see if El could execute his plan perfectly. Suddenly, he called out that he was done and proudly presented his perfectly salted soup, simmering away in a black pot. The steam rose beautifully, and its aroma spread evenly and gently throughout the room. Serena expressed her excitement, saying that the soup El had cooked looked really good, and she couldn't wait to try it. Serena, Kana, and El's mother sat at their table, enjoying the soup El had prepared for them, with El's seat being the only one empty. El's mother was also delighted with the soup her son had prepared and complimented him on the taste. She also asked if there was anything he wasn't the best at. Kana was equally thrilled and wore a very contented expression as she focused entirely on the food. El's mother turned to him, and he turned back to her, even though he was in the midst of preparing another dish for his family. His mother told him that she actually wanted to cook something for him on his 17th birthday. El, still preparing his dish, replied that it was okay. He really enjoyed cooking and had fun doing it. In his previous life, he had to take care of himself and cook alone for 10 years, so it was a change of pace to cook for someone else, which could be enjoyable at times. Besides, it made his loving mother very happy, which was another reason why he did it. He looked genuinely happy as he told his family that the new dish was ready, and they should try it. It was fried rice with egg, beautifully presented. El had to pause for a moment because it wasn't easy to prepare kimchi fried rice in that place. He had to search everywhere for rice, cabbage, and the right spices, but once he found everything, he used some of his magic to create the kimchi in all its glory. El wondered how his sisters and his mother would react to his home-cooked meal and turned to them to see their reaction. Everyone was delighted, with smiles on their faces as they enjoyed the dish. El was also thrilled and happy that his home-cooked meal was so well received by his new family, and he cheered in response. Even though it was a bit spicy and hot, his family couldn't stop eating and wanted seconds. Once everyone was finished, El set about washing the used plates until they sparkled. He looked at the clean dishes in the sunlight streaming through the window above the sink and realized that it was a truly wonderful feeling that everyone enjoyed his food and had fun eating it. Suddenly, El's mother stood behind him and told him that she needed to discuss something important with him. El turned around, shocked, and noticed that his mother had a serious expression. He wondered what it could be that she wanted from him. He said he would listen to her and followed her into her room. El stood by the window while his mother sat on a chair. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, not as cheerful and affectionate as usual in their house. El looked up, wondering why his mother wasn't saying anything. He wondered if it was about a difficult topic and she needed time to gather herself before addressing it. He gazed at his sad, silent mother, and a thought crossed his mind that she might know about something he had done back then and wouldn't approve of it. However, he quickly dismissed the idea, knowing that couldn't be the case. Elle's mother clenched her fists and confessed that she had been keeping something hidden from him. She continued, revealing that it was about her past and his father. Now that he was old enough, she wanted to tell him the whole truth. With courage, she explained that she was actually the daughter of the Marquis Einhart family from the Bliard Kingdom, and her full name was Silfer von Einhart. This news astonished Elle, and his facial expression showed a shocked reaction. He couldn't believe he had just heard the words, Bliard Kingdom and Einhart. Among the hundreds of nations on the continent, the Bliard Kingdom was one of the 5 strongest nations. Moreover, the Marquis Einhart family was a family of magicians that produced countless excellent mages. The head of the family, Marquis Einhart, was almost reaching the 8th grade, while his son, an expert of the 7th grade, also held power over the kingdom. Elle knew this family was a true elite family. Elle stood at the open window, looking at his mother's pendant. He had to admit that he had been wondering where she got it all this time. It was an artifact that only magicians of the 7th grade or higher could create. Moreover, all the books in this house were very difficult to obtain unless one was an aristocrat or a mage from a renowned family. Elle's mother continued her story, revealing that she lost her mother just 4 days after her birth and was raised by her much older brother and strict father. She also explained that she was promised to the prince of the Bliard Kingdom at the age of 7. But all she wanted was freedom, she didn't want to be restricted by anything. She just wanted to live as she had always wished. At that time, she met Rian Luvius and fell in love with him. Rian was a magician for her family, though not particularly outstanding or handsome. Still, he was someone who gave her hope and made her dream of freedom. Rian also told her back then that she should have more confidence in herself. Normally, Silfer was supposed to marry the prince once she reached the age of 16. However, she chose to run away with her new lover, Rian, and finally follow her dreams and be free. Even when they were pursued by her family during their escape, they were happy as long as they were together. They led a simple life but were captured by her family relatively quickly within a year, and Silfer ended up in a small, uncomfortable cell. She sat huddled on a small bench inside the cell and was deeply unhappy about her current situation. Her father visited her then, looked at the untouched food, and asked his daughter how long she planned to stay like this. Furthermore, he asked her if she loved Rian so much that she would lead such a life for him, imprisoned like a rat in a small cage. Silfer looked at her father disdainfully and demanded that he should set her beloved Rian free, otherwise, she would want to take her own life. Her father just grinned and said that she was just as stubborn as he was. Being his daughter. With sarcasm and irony, he remarked on what a perfect couple his daughter and Rian would make. He also told her that Rian worried about her just as much as she worried about him. Meanwhile, Rian was in a much worse condition than Silfer. He was chained to a wall and couldn't even take a few steps. Moreover, he was wearing only old, tattered, dirty rags and looked visibly exhausted from standing for so long. However, the only thing on his mind was Silfer, and he kept asking if she was okay. Her father wasn't entirely sure and asked if they always thought of each other like this. Then he revealed that he planned to let her friend go. This surprising turn of events astonished Silfer. Her father said that she was still a part of his precious family, after all. Silfer believed her father and looked at him with shining eyes, as if he were a knight in shining armor, and she had hope again that she would be reunited with her friend Rian. Shortly after, 2 guards brought Rian to the garden of her family's estate, and there was a touching reunion between the two. Silfer ran to her friend immediately, and they couldn't believe they were seeing each other again. Silfer apologized to him for the situation he had gotten into because of her and asked how Rian was doing. He said he was doing all right but questioned whether he heard correctly that she would stay here because of him. Rian didn't like that and remarked that it sounded like she was being held hostage. Silver put a finger to his lips, silencing him. She said that thanks to his help, she could live a free life, and even if that freedom was only temporary, she confessed that she had been truly happy with him. With tears in her eyes, she pleaded with her beloved Rian to leave this place and live a happy life because she didn't have the confidence to live in a world where he didn't exist. Rian was moved by Silver's words and looked at her affectionately. He gently placed his forehead against hers, and both of their tears ran down their cheeks, shining like stars in the night sky. Rian told her that even if they were to part, they should be forever connected no matter what happens. Suddenly, a sword swung down and beheaded Rian right in front of Silver's eyes. Completely in shock, Silver stood there and couldn't immediately comprehend what had just happened. Blood splattered everywhere, and a few drops landed on her face and clothes. Stuttering, she stood before Rian's lifeless body lying on the ground as one of the guards who had led him to the garden held his bloodied sword. Her father told her that he had kept his promise and had put Rian out of his misery, while the guard aimed his blade at Silver. He went on to say that he even showed the magnanimity to let Rian say goodbye before executing him. Such was his love for his daughter. Silver was still in shock and didn't know which way was up or down, she simply stood there. Amid her father's screams, Silver fell to the ground, covering her ears to minimize the noise, and wept for her beloved Rian. She explained that the reason for all this was that Marquis Einhart never forgave them for running away together, breaking off the engagement with the prince, and bringing shame upon the family. Elle had to process all of this and couldn't stop marveling at the revelations. With eyes wide open, he still stood by the window, looking down at his loving mother. She continued to explain that she was excommunicated from her family, but to preserve the family's reputation. Her father allowed her to live here and told her to return once she had mastered the 6th grade of magic. The warm sun shone through the small window behind Elle as he listened to his mother. She said that after Rian's death, she initially thought of ending her life here but then realized she was pregnant with his child. This shocked him once again. His mother went on to say that this was the greatest joy she had felt in a long time and that she wanted to do everything to make her beloved son happy. She wanted to give her son all the good things in the world, and that was what she wanted to live for. With a very determined look in her eyes, she told Elle that she intended to reclaim the name Einhart. Elle was once again a little surprised but didn't say a word. His mother stood up from her chair and explained that she had now mastered the 6th grade and that her family would take her back. She extended her hand to Elle and continued to explain that the Einhart family estate was the best place to learn everything about magic and that she could provide him with a better learning environment there. She asked him to come home with her. Elle didn't know what to say and was still completely in shock. It took a moment before Elle asked his mother why she wanted to go back to her terrible family. He told her that she could stay here as she was a 6th grade master of magic and could receive a title. He asked her again why she wanted to return to the Einhart family. Clearly, Elle didn't understand why she was so eager to go back to her terrible family. His mother then explained that aristocrats here in this nation were treated somewhat differently, but the Bliard Kingdom was the strongest nation on the continent, and the Einhart family was on a similar level to the royal family. Moreover, she told her son, as she clenched her fist resolutely, that she wanted to make sure he could reach his full potential and that she could provide him with the best possible environment. She looked at Elle more self-assured than ever and asked him to think about her decision. Elle had to consider it for a moment. Then calmly exhaled and said with a smile on his face that he would accompany her. This visibly pleased Elle's mother, and her face lit up as she looked at her son with her blue eyes and heard his decision to accompany her. Silver embraced her son and told him that she loved him very much, to which Elle replied that he loved her very much too. He also said that he would need to get ready to prepare his things to leave. Elle opened the door to the hallway and left his mother's room. Suddenly, he looked to his left and saw his 2 sisters, Serena and Kana, standing there. Both looked anxious and unhappy. Serena spoke with a trembling voice, apologizing that they didn't mean to eavesdrop. But they overheard something. As the midday sun shone through the hallway window, illuminating the space, Serena and her sister Kana hesitantly asked Elle what would happen to them now. Serena fought back tears as Kana tried to comfort her, gently touching her arm. Serena questioned whether they were technically still slaves, and if they went to the Einhart family, they could no longer be with them. Elle, however, wasn't concerned about that and was relieved that the issue his sisters brought up was only about this matter and not a bigger problem he had to solve on the side. He assured them that they were a family, and that meant they would be together forever. This surprised his sisters, as they had never experienced such love in their lives before. Elle told them that he would think of a few ideas to give them new identities. He had already come up with a couple of options, such as registering Serena and Kana as traitors or mercenaries. He told them not to worry and not to hang their heads low. This made Serena and Kana very happy, and with tears of joy in their eyes, the two sisters gratefully thanked their brother for being willing to do so much for them and that they wouldn't have to part from their loving new family. Elle told them that he needed to visit someone, and his mother shouldn't know about it. However, they should start packing their things and prepare for departure. His sisters agreed and promised not to tell their mother about Elle's visit to a place she shouldn't know about. Elle turned around and left with a happy expression, which he put on for the sake of his sisters. He left the house and realized that he couldn't change his mother's mind. So, he understood that there was only one thing he could do. With a determined look in his eyes, signifying that Elle had also made a decision, he went to Dibel's shop. Dibel greeted Elle, saying it had been a while since they last saw each other. Dibel extended his hand and asked Elle to take a seat at a table. Once they were both sitting at the table, Dibel thanked Elle for the rights to sell his magic stones, explaining that his business was flourishing thanks to these stones. Elle said that he had come to ask him a favor today. He assumed that Dibel would know, given that he ran a business and had access to an excellent network of information. Dibel said that this was definitely the case and explained to Elle that he had some partnerships with information guilds that spanned across the continent. If Elle wanted, he could even tell him about the royal secret treasures and riches. However, when Elle expressed his interest in knowing everything about the Marquis Einhart family from the Bliard Kingdom, Dibel was shocked. He looked at Elle and wondered what had suddenly changed the atmosphere. Elle appeared completely serious and focused, unlike anything Dibel had seen before. Dibel had to swallow hard as he realized how serious the situation was and how important this one question was to Elle. He began to tell him about the Marquis Einhart family. The Marquis Einhart family had a history of over 700 years and was one of the most prestigious families in the kingdom. They produced 3 8th-class magicians and had hundreds of magicians connected to the family in some way. The Marquis wielded considerable influence and could easily summon thousands of magicians if he wished. Dibel also mentioned a notorious incident involving an engagement with the Crown Prince of the Bliard Kingdom. Shortly before their wedding, the Marquis's daughter eloped with another man, which aligned with Elle's mother's story. Dibel explained that originally, such a crime would have resulted in beheading, but according to his information, the Marquis and the Crown Prince forgave the daughter and her lover, earning them the respect and praise of many other aristocrats. Elle sat tensely in his chair, unable to believe what the hell he had just heard. He knew the true story and was astonished that his mother was used as a political tool. However, Dibel also mentioned rumors that the Marquis was a cold, ruthless man who would do anything to preserve and enhance his family's reputation. He advised Elle not to get involved with them. Elle stood up and told Dibel that he understood his advice and thanked him for the information. Elle realized that if they were to return to the Einhart family, they would likely take his mother back and accept her. However, he also recognized that there was a high probability his mother would be used for political purposes. Therefore, he made the decision that if this family dared to harm him or his mother in any way, he would make them pay for it. Dibel mentioned that he felt the Tower Master had been feeling somewhat lonely lately. Elle turned around, feeling somewhat puzzled, and decided to visit his old friend at the mage tower. The tower master was sitting at his desk, resting his head on his hand, contemplating that it was indeed lonely, but it was not uncommon for an old man to be forgotten at times. El stood behind him and said that was why he had come to visit him today. The tower master looked away, appearing somewhat offended. El then said that he had also come with a gift, piquing the old man's curiosity. El took out a few papers and explained with a smile that they were blueprints for a night golem. The tower master jumped up excitedly and couldn't believe what his old ears had just heard. However, El also explained that it wasn't possible to create a golem with its own consciousness, and that it would require a knight to control the golem. He also expressed his doubt that any magician could create a golem with its own consciousness. The tower master took the papers in his hands, pondered, and asked El if this was really the case, suggesting that he didn't entirely buy his statement. El asked what was on his mind. The tower master then said that he believed El had something else on his mind. El managed to dodge the question and said he was just exhausted from all his experiments, which the tower master believed. El was relieved that he believed the explanation, but he had to acknowledge that the tower master, despite his age, was sharp and had a keen perception, not easily fooled. He also told the old tower master that he would be leaving this place with his family soon and didn't think he would be coming back anytime soon. The master was surprised and asked why he couldn't return. He pondered for a moment and stroked his long white beard. He put El's papers aside and said that considering El's serious demeanor, something significant must be the reason. He approached El, placed his hand on his shoulder, and told him to go ahead. He was sure that with his talent, El would be able to make a name for himself across the continent one day. He looked deep into El's eyes and assured him that he would hear news about him someday. El looked touched by his master's words and thanked him for everything he had done for him so far. He promised that he would definitely visit him again someday. With the tower master's last words, stating that he would be waiting for him, the two bid farewell to each other. As night approached, the moon rose over El's family house in the night sky. El found himself back in his laboratory, a few papers flying around on his table, and some magic stones in a small container. Having said goodbye to everyone he wanted to, it was time for him to make his final preparations. He stretched out his hand and used some of his magic, causing a large magical circle to appear before him. From within the circle emerged a large golem dressed in golden armor, standing before El. Despite what he had told the tower master, El had managed to create a golem with its own consciousness. As the golem stood before El, he called out loudly for it to awaken as the golden knight. A shining golden light emanated from the small opening in its helmet, and the golem bowed before its new master, greeting him with dignity. El rubbed the back of his head and realized that something wasn't quite to his satisfaction as he hadn't put his best ego into this golem. He told his golem that he would soon have a suitable task for him, but until then, he should wait and be ready for his assignment. The golem said he understood his orders and would wait for his deployment. Then, the golem stood up, turned around, and walked back through the magical circle into the interdimensional space from where he had come. Once the golem had completely passed through, the magical circle disappeared as well. The golem was the crystallized creation of all his magical knowledge, always appearing when he called for it. He hoped that he wouldn't need to see its full power anytime soon. Now that El had finished this final task as well, he was ready to leave. Meanwhile, in the very large estate of the Einhart family, the Marquis and his son were playing a game of chess. The son told his father that the investigations of the magic stones were complete. The Marquis explained that these stones had earned them a lot of money by avoiding any negative consequences for the Einhart family. The son then revealed that he had found the source of the stones and placed his chess piece on one of the squares. The Marquis destroyed the piece his son had put there and with a greedy expression said he was delighted that he had finally managed to find the source. The Marquis and his son sat across from each other, a small table with a chessboard and a small tea set in the middle. After calming down a bit, the Marquis asked his son why it had taken so long to find the source of the magic stones. He was sure he had given him this task a few years ago. His son explained that the golems that were developed to protect the stone's creator and provide security were quite powerful. Even the best, strongest, and most infamous assassins of the Brad family had no chance against these golems and were defeated and killed one after another by them. The Marquis picked up one of his chess pieces, stroked his beard, and contemplated. He realized that they were dealing with a formidable opponent who had achieved something that no one else could replicate in any way. His son, who was about to make his move in chess, said that even the other magical towers had struggled to find the origin of the magic stones. He told his father that he knew for a fact that the production cost of such stones couldn't be very high and that if they were able to manufacture them, they would have a magical item that could generate a lot of money. The Marquis looked down and continued to think. He had to admit that the magic stones would indeed be a very valuable item. He planned ahead and told his son that if they were able to sell these stones in their top 10 largest stores across the continent, the Einhart family businesses should become the best in the entire continent. His son was somewhat surprised since he knew his father and knew that he didn't give many compliments. Therefore, it surprised him that his father would give so many compliments to these magic stones. This illustrated to him what a fantastic item it must be. In any case, the son continued and informed his father that he had found out who was behind the magic stone's source and admitted that he was surprised by the name of the creator. He told his father that the manufacturer of these stones was a magician named Silver, which immediately brought flashbacks of his daughter to the Marquis, leaving him with an astonished expression. He further explained to his father that it was actually her son who officially developed the stones but also mentioned that he was only 17 years old and he didn't want to believe it for that reason. The Marquis placed the chess piece he was holding back on the chessboard and couldn't believe that his own daughter Silver should be the one who developed such a wonderful item. He immediately ordered his son to send someone to bring his daughter directly to him. The Marquis stood up, turned his back to his son, and also said that the people who would bring his daughter should present her with the condition of being readmitted to the family. And if she agreed, they would also accept her son, as the Marquis knew his daughter and considered her a useless, stubborn person. He knew that she would say yes to the condition of also accepting her son. Greedily, he only saw the red magic stones and desperately wanted to hold them in his hands. He believed that once he possessed them, he could bring the family back to the top. His son also stood up and asked his father what he intended to do about the crown prince. He said that the crown prince would surely be angry if he found out that Silver was returning. However, the father only said that they should leave him alone as long as he wasn't hostile towards them. As long as he remained peaceful. There was no reason to act against him. The Marquis contemplated that in the past, his daughter had been nothing but a useless scum to him. But now, he wanted to exploit her for his own goals, the daughter he had once discarded. Elle's mother stood in front of her house and looked back sadly. Elle told her that they were all ready to go and leave. Then, his mother turned to him and his sisters. She apologized and said she didn't know they would leave so soon. Now, as this moment had come, she noticed that her heart was getting heavier. Both Elle and his mother were sad, with a heavy atmosphere in their faces. Actually, Elle was also content not to return to such a place where terrible memories awaited his mother. Besides, he had wanted to tell her for a while that he had become a 7th-grade magician. However, he also knew that in this world, one was considered a genius if they reached the 7th grade of magic at the age of 40, and he didn't know how to explain to her that he had reached this grade at the age of 17. He didn't want his loving mother to look at him as if he were something abnormal. With his 2 sisters, Serena and Kana, in his arms, Elle's mother took step by step, moving a little further away from her house. Elle clenched his fist and felt somewhat angry, but at the same time disappointed that he couldn't tell his mother everything. He also didn't know how to handle it if his power were to be revealed in a difficult situation. Elle and his family then set off, for now, the last time, towards the nearby city of Bangkok. El's mother led the small group and explained to him and his two sisters that they were standing in front of a gate that would take them directly to the capital, Kefirmil. Cautiously, Silfer approached a man sitting in front of the gate and apologized. She said they would like to go through the gate to Kefirmil as a group of 4 and asked how much it would cost. The man, bored with his job, said it would cost 200 gold per person, totaling 800 gold. El's mother repeated the number 800 gold loudly and with surprise, which echoed throughout the building, finding it too expensive. The guard grabbed Silfer's hand and asked if she couldn't pay. Gripping tighter and telling her that usually only noble and wealthy people passed through this portal and that she should leave if she couldn't pay. When her mother was roughly handled, Kana immediately sprang into action. Before the guard could realize what was happening, Kana halted her attack just a few inches from his head. With an angry look, she warned the guard not to dare touch her family and demanded that he let her mother go immediately. This surprising reaction not only stunned El but also his sister Serena and their mother Silfer. Even the guard was taken aback by the sudden outburst but subsequently released Silfer and stepped back slightly. Suddenly, another guard appeared in the small room with the portal. Surprised by how his colleague had quickly caused a problem and started a dispute. He apologized for his colleague's behavior, acknowledging that he had been very rude. He then instructed him to leave and keep his head down. After that, he explained to El and his family that it would take half a year to walk to the Blired Kingdom, and therefore a total price of 400 gold was initially set. To their delight, he informed them that for 4 or more people going through the portal, a discount would be applied, and they would only have to pay 360 gold. El could hardly believe they almost paid 800 gold. His mother told him that she already knew the price would be around 400 gold. Subsequently, El handed the agreed price to the friendly guard, who immediately got everything ready. The guard asked El and his family if they were visiting the Royal Blired for a vacation, to which they explained that they were moving there. The guard remarked to Silfer that she must feel safe being a part of such a reliable family, at which point everyone looked at Kana, who had just defended her family like a protective mother lion, just in a different way. After the preparations were completed, the guard asked them all to stand in the middle of the magical circle as they were about to be teleported any moment. El, his mother Silfer, Serena, and Kana gazed at the magical circle, eager to see what would happen next. A small blue beam of light descended upon them, causing them to dissolve into smaller blue sparks that rose into the air, where the blue light originated from. Together, they landed at a small location in the middle of Kefirmil, right at a teleportation gate. Upon their arrival, Serena asked if that was all, to which Kana replied that it certainly seemed so. El and his sisters marveled at the sight of a small city with a large bell tower, realizing that it must be Kefirmil. Their mother pointed to a building and said they would stay there for the day. As they approached the building's door, she explained that before they could reach the Marquis's estate, Serena and Kana needed to register as mercenaries first. Cheerfully and with a smile on her face, Silfer led her children into the building, confident that their skills would easily qualify them as high-ranking mercenaries. She urged them to unpack quickly so they could go out together and looked forward to showing her children around. Suddenly, she heard her name, and a shiver ran down her spine. Silfer turned pale and went into shock. She looked ahead and recognized Crown Prince Al-Qaid, who was passing by with his guards. With a slight smile on his lips, he expressed his delight at seeing her again. El was equally surprised to see the Crown Prince, his mother's former fiancé, in person. He knew from his conversation with Dibel that after extensive investigations, it was discovered that his father, Rion Luvius, was murdered on the Crown Prince's orders when his mother was captured after they had left her family and run away. El immediately remembered his mother's distraught face as his father died before her eyes, and the tears she shed afterward. The Crown Prince greeted Silfer, stating that she looked well, and he was relieved to see her in good health. Politely but still in shock, Silfer responded that it was true, addressing the Crown Prince as Your Highness. However, to Silfer's surprise, the Crown Prince told her to relax. He explained that they had been separated due to an unfortunate event but expressed his happiness to see her again. He then inquired about the children hiding behind her. Silver answered hesitantly that it wasn't easy to explain and searched for a way to tell him. Kaina whispered to her sister that he seemed like a gentleman, and she had imagined the crown prince to be different. However, Elle could see beyond the cheerful, nice facade and realized that the crown prince wore a mask, and his true face was much uglier than his sisters could imagine. The crown prince scrutinized Elle's mother and found that she still looked as beautiful as ever. Despite being in her 30s now, he believed she still radiated and remained the most beautiful woman in the entire Bliard kingdom, in his eyes. He was still convinced that she was the right woman for him. No matter what might have happened in the past. Greedy, he still wanted to possess her. Elle became angry as he could see the crown prince's hidden desire, given that he was at the 7th level of magic. He had to bite his tongue to keep from losing his temper. With a smile, Elle inserted himself into the conversation between the crown prince and his mother, asking how he knew her. In response, he also put on a false mask, extended his hand, and said it would be a pleasure to meet him. He introduced himself as her son, Elle. The only thing Elle aimed for was to prevent the greedy crown prince from eyeing his mother with impure intentions. The crown prince was somewhat surprised to hear that he was supposedly her son. And so Elle and the crown prince faced each other. The crown prince quickly composed himself and asked if he understood correctly that he was Silver's son. However, he soon remarked that he now saw a certain resemblance and that Elle looked quite similar to him. Internally struggling, Elle managed to maintain his cheerful smile and composure. Still wearing his false mask, the crown prince cheerfully said that he would love to stay a bit longer and continue the conversation, but he had other important matters that couldn't wait any longer. He asked if there would be an opportunity to seize the chance to have a drink together. Silver said she would eagerly and happily await such an opportunity. As the crown prince departed and passed by Silver, he whispered to her with his true face that she was actually his wife. She fell into a shocked state again and turned pale. Elle turned around and, like his mother, couldn't believe what he had just heard. Furiously, he managed to hold back any insults that came to mind and kept them to himself. The crown prince realized that Silver would return to her family, meaning she had succeeded in mastering the 6th level of magic. As he continued on to his other important appointments, he recognized that his beloved was not only beautiful but also possessed talent in magic, making her even more of a perfect woman in his eyes. With his true greedy face, he thought it wouldn't be bad to take her as his mistress, and he realized her family would have no objections. In fact, it would make Marquis Einhart equally happy to get rid of his useless but beautiful daughter. However, before that happened, the crown prince wanted to get rid of the children she was accompanying, especially her son. Elle grew angrier and clenched his fist as he glared at the crown prince with disdain. After regaining his composure, he asked his mother if everything was all right. She apologized and told herself to pull herself together. She suggested they go directly to the mercenary guild to begin Serena and Kaina's registration. Silver cheerfully led the way, pretending to be as happy as the crown prince had interrupted her. However, Elle, Serena, and Kaina knew that their mother was playing the act for their benefit and was not as happy as she seemed in that moment. They set off together for the mercenary guild, which was located in a beautiful building with a blue roof. Their interior was simple and clean, quite different from what one might imagine. Behind the counter, there was a man with little to do since everything was empty. Silver approached the man at the counter and apologized for the interruption. She explained that her 2 daughters would like to sign up for the mercenary recruitment process. The man at the counter welcomed them and explained that there were different ranks among the mercenaries, ranging from F rank to B rank. He also told them that to determine their rank, they would have to fight against the guild master, who held an A rank position. Soon after, a middle-aged man arrived, giving off a very pleasant impression as he hummed and laughed cheerfully. He recognized that the 2 young women wanted to fight against him today to be assigned a rank. He asked if they were sure and really wanted to take the test since they were too sweet for it. He said it was okay, though, and they could go ahead with the test. However, he made a suggestion that they both fight him simultaneously, as he was not convinced of their strength. Moreover, he further infuriated them by saying he would go easy on them so as not to hurt the two lovely ladies. Serena and Kana were not pleased with how they were being treated and became a little angry. They both called out each other's names and agreed to give it their all to show the arrogant guild master that he was wrong and they didn't need any special treatment. They entered a sort of coliseum or arena and prepared to begin the examination. The guild master stood in front of them and said they could start any time they were ready. He also told them to do their best. Though he might have been somewhat arrogant, he was by no means a bad guy. Serena and Kana asked if he was serious about them giving their best. He replied that he was sure, and they shouldn't worry about him getting mad at them. At the same time, Serena and Kana were ready for their test and began it. Kana unsheathed her sword and charged at the guild master, enveloping her sword with fire and hitting him. But before he could recover, Serena was also preparing an attack, using her wind magic, which also hit the guild master and sent him soaring into the air. When their magic had dissipated and Serena and Kana waited for their evaluation from the guild master, the sun shone down on them, and they glittered in the sunlight. Completely overwhelmed and utterly surprised, the guild master lay on the ground and awarded both of them the B rank. L was visibly delighted and congratulated his two sisters on achieving the highest possible rank, telling them they did a great job. Serena then said they were really relieved that things went so well. Kana asked L if this would be enough and if they were good enough to protect their mother. However, their mother was completely lost in thought and didn't even pay attention to her daughters. It was only when they called her name that she suddenly turned to them and asked what was going on. Without having seen anything of the test, she said that the two had done a great job and were truly amazing. L knew that his mother wasn't doing so well and had a small trauma caused by the crown prince. It was nighttime, and the lights from the houses shone outside. L's mother sat on her bed, contemplating the crown prince and the fact that he hadn't changed over the years. She realized he was still obsessed with her and would do anything to make her his lover. She also knew that if that were to happen, L would end up just like Rian. L meant everything to her, and she would sacrifice anything she could to protect him. She couldn't bear any harm coming to her own child. Originally, she had planned to secretly return to her family without drawing much attention. She never could have anticipated running into the crown prince in a place like this. She also recognized that her Einhart family would prioritize the crown prince's desires over protecting L. She knew she had to somehow make her family prioritize L's protection over him. So, she wanted to come up with a plan to achieve this. Suddenly there was a knock on the door and L told his mother that he would come in now. L looked at his mother, who asked him what he would think about offering her method of creating his magic stones to her Einhart family. L looked at his mother and listened further. Silfer explained to L that the entire continent was currently obsessed with the magic stones, and she was sure that the Marquis would want to have that information for producing the stones. She explained to L that if he gave him his method, the Marquis would protect her in return. L told her that he was capable of protecting her without giving his method to anyone. Serena and Kana also looked into the room and said they were still there and would protect their mother too. Suddenly, L, Serena, and Kana brought out some drinks and food from behind their backs, trying to cheer up their mother, and suggested she have a drink to forget the bad experiences she had today. L also said that now he could have a drink with her too since he was officially 17. His sisters said they had also prepared something and looked forward to enjoying it together with their mother. L's mother then realized that she had gotten too caught up in things and that she had a new family now, one that was much better than her old one and would protect each other. She had tears in her eyes and felt grateful for this small, kind family. They all ate and drank together in Silfer's room, had fun, and forgot what had happened in the city that afternoon. L thought about his deceased parents from his previous life who unfortunately died, and he never had the opportunity to have a drink with them. Even when things got tough due to debts, he couldn't do anything to help back then, even though he wanted to. But he wanted to change that in this life because here, he could do something for a family. He could become faster and stronger than anyone else in this life through his own efforts alone. He wanted to ensure that in this life, he would do everything he could to help his family, something he couldn't accomplish in his previous life. El smiled, holding a small cup in his hand, and expressed his love to everyone. They jokingly asked if he was already drunk, but he stated that he wouldn't forgive anyone who dared to make his happy family unhappy. His golem stood motionless in the interdimensional space, awaiting its master's command. Suddenly, its eyes glimmered as it received and accepted an order. The next morning, El stood by his window, looking outside, hoping that the day ahead would be better than the previous one, with fewer problems. He stayed there for a while, contemplating how to proceed and enjoying the morning sun on his skin. Soon after, they headed to the Einhart family estate and marveled at its grandeur. They stood before a massive gate adorned with golden accents. Serena and Kana were in awe and expected nothing less from the most prestigious family. They compared the surrounding fence to the walls of Bangkok City, noting that they were just as large. El's mother, however, had a bad feeling about returning to her family and realized that nothing had changed over the years. She took a deep breath, changed her expression, took a few steps, and was determined to gather herself and not show any more weakness. One of the guards at the gate asked her what she was doing there. Silver explained that she was here to speak with the Marquis, to which the clueless guard inquired if she had an appointment, or else she couldn't be allowed in. With confidence, she told the guard to inform the Marquis herself that Silver had returned after 17 years. The guard suddenly recognized her and stammered her name. He immediately apologized and said he would report it right away. Then he opened the gate and ran inside to deliver the news. El's mother thought about how the power of her Einhart family supposedly declined after the annulment of her engagement. She also recalled that when she was expelled, her father was so devastated that he refused to eat or drink for a month. She looked through the open gate at her family's estate and tried to see the good in her father. She knew that her former lover, Rian, was executed on the crown prince's orders, and her father didn't really want it. She remembered how he had screamed, saying she should be grateful that he had killed her beloved, and she wondered why he had said such a thing. Suddenly, El touched her shoulder, offering emotional support. She turned around and saw her son, knowing that everything would be all right with him by her side. She also touched his hand. Then her father and brother came up the driveway, calling her name. Her father immediately touched her shoulders with both hands, pushing El aside, and said that he was sorry and had made a terrible mistake. Silver couldn't believe that her father, who had always been reliable and sought glory and power for the family, was apologizing to her first. She immediately sensed that there was more to it. Nonetheless, she also apologized to him and expressed regret. However, her father's attention quickly shifted to his son El. He asked her if El was her son and sought confirmation from Silver. She immediately understood her father's intentions, and a chill ran down her spine. She affirmed that El was indeed her son. They introduced themselves to each other, and El played along, introducing himself with a friendly demeanor and affectionately calling the Marquis grandfather. Silver's father smiled as well and expressed his pleasure in meeting El. He found El to be very amiable, but he also noticed that El's eyes had changed the moment he recognized him and that he had examined him and his mana with incredible speed. He also recognized that El was on the 5th level of magic. He immediately realized that El should actually be over 17 years old, and he was already surprised that his daughter Silver had reached the 6th level. But he had not expected such a young genius. El knew that the Marquis was a person of great power, but he also knew that even the Marquis shouldn't immediately recognize that he was on the 7th level. Silver's brother then suggested moving the conversation inside, and they followed his suggestion. It was another sunny day, with only a few clouds scattered across the sky. The Marquis sat at a table with Silver, her son, and her daughter. Silver immediately asked him what this conversation was about. Her father wasted no time and responded to his daughter's question by asking if it was true that she was the developer of the magical stones. This surprised Silver visibly, and she looked at her father, who wore a cheerful expression, as he thought he already knew the answer. The Marquis could only think about how he could quickly sell the stones and double the family's fortune. He also thought about how much influence it would give the family over the mages in the kingdom. His only interest was to make the Einhart family even more powerful to the point where they could even rule the kingdom as a royal authority. He was practically obsessed with not letting this grand opportunity slip away. Elle recognized that the Marquis's eyes were solely focused on his greed, and it was evident what he was thinking. Continuing, the Marquis expressed hope that now that his beloved daughter was back, they could be open with each other. He also stated that it was her duty to contribute to the improvement of the family. Silver clenched both hands into fists, unable to believe that she had heard the words duty and family in the same sentence. However, she composed herself and told her father that there was a condition for her contribution. The Marquis was curious and asked what condition she had in mind. Silver loudly exclaimed that he should make her son Elle the Marquis. This astonished everyone present, including her own son. They all couldn't believe what she had just said and asked her if she was serious. Silver said she was serious and explained that Elle was actually the one who had developed the method for creating the magical stones. And she had done nothing herself. She also told her father that he had noticed it himself when he examined Elle's mana and knew that her son was at the 5th level of magic at just 17 years old. Elle was surprised that his mother had found this out as well. Silver further explained that among all 10 mages on the continent who had reached the 8th level, no one had reached the 5th level at such a young age. She also said that soon her son Elle would become a very powerful mage who would shake the entire continent. She continued to emphasize that the magic stones and their value were recognized throughout the continent and, combined with the fact that he was the world's greatest mage prodigy, would be enough to make the Einhart family the largest family not only in the Bliard kingdom but also in the entire continent. Silver continued to put pressure on her father, asking him with all the confidence she had built up if he would accept her condition. However, her father said that he couldn't make such a big and difficult decision on the spot. But Silver didn't want to hear that answer and directly told her father that she came here with the plan to designate her son Elle as the successor, and he had to make a decision now. Her father was surprised by her confidence and strong words, as he had not expected this from her. But Silver wasn't done yet. She told her father that Elle would eventually become a much better mage than he was. And if he didn't give her a positive answer to her question, she wouldn't reveal the secret behind the magic stones to him. Her father was completely bewildered. He had never seen his daughter like this. Normally, Silver obeyed him and was as docile as a little kitten, but now he was witnessing a different side of his daughter, the one of a lioness defending her newborn. The Marquis said that he needed some time to think about this proposal and wanted to do so right away. Silver told her father that she would look forward to his answer if it turned out positive, and that she would be waiting for his decision. Then she and Elle left the room and walked along the hallway. Elle looked downcast and wanted to talk with his mother about what she had just proposed to his father. However, his mother turned around cheerfully and reassured him not to worry. Suddenly, Serena and Kana came out of their room, having heard their brother and mother's voices, and were quite curious about what important family matters were being discussed. Silver embraced her other 2 children and apologized for leaving them alone in the room. Elle stood apart and continued to think about what had been said during the conversation with the Marquis and his mother. Kana asked Silver if she was okay, and Silver confirmed it. She then asked if they had already received a detailed tour of the rooms. If not, she would now take on that task. Elle then made his way to his room, his thoughts still revolving around the conversation with the Marquis and his mother. He had never expected his mother to say something like that and set such a condition. However, as Elle entered his room, closed the door behind him, and leaned against it, he also knew that the Marquis would never agree to this condition. He realized that he had to look further into the future and plan ahead to stay a few steps ahead. El used his summoning magic to summon a magical pair of glasses that appeared directly on his nose. He adjusted them and said that he didn't actually need glasses, but they would help him concentrate better. They reminded him of his past and his previous life. With these self-created glasses, El could better sense the flow of mana, and he wanted to go and see what the Marquis really thought about him and his mother. El raised his hand and used his magic to cast invisibility once again. Within seconds, El became invisible, and he couldn't be seen anymore. He opened his room door and slowly made his way to the room where Silfer's father, the Marquis, would be. From outside, one could hear his son asking him what he intended to do about Silfer's child and if he would seriously consider appointing this child as his successor or new family head. El stood in front of the door, eager to find out what the Marquis and his son were discussing about him. El made his way into the room where the Marquis and his son were and continued to listen as the Marquis advised his son not to make any inappropriate faces. Both of them stood in front of a target and took turns throwing knives at it, keeping themselves occupied during their conversation. El remained invisible, hiding behind a small partition in the room to better eavesdrop on their conversation. The Marquis had to admit that El was undoubtedly qualified for the position his daughter had claimed for him. While playing with one of the knives they were throwing at the target, the Marquis continued to praise El, acknowledging his talent and impressive achievement of mastering 5th-grade magic at the age of 17. However, he doubted whether El was suitable to lead this family, given that he had grown up in a foreign nation for 17 years. Moreover, the Marquis recognized the possibility that El might have come here only seeking revenge. As the Marquis threw another knife, it almost stuck in the center of the target and wobbled slightly. Silfer, the Marquis' son, mentioned that his sister was a 6th-grade magician, which could pose a small problem. After his father was in the process of taking out another knife from a pile, he said that they had 20 mages here who were at least in the 6th class and that they would never lose in a direct fight against Silfer and her son El. Furthermore, the Marquis turned to his son and asked him if he remembered the letter from the Crown Prince. He reminded his son that in that letter, the prince expressed his willingness to accept Silfer as his lover again, should they agree. The son questioned if it would work and raised the objection that his sister might already know and resist again. He further raised the objection that if she were to become the prince's new lover, she could find out that they secretly abduct talented people from other countries and brainwash them to become their allies. Suddenly, the Marquis shouted at his son to shut up, shocking him. The Marquis explained to his son, while playing with the knife again, that even if they remain silent, anyone who uses magic could still listen to them. El noticed that they had set up multiple devices to conceal their conversation. Something even a 6th-grade magician wouldn't easily bypass. However, he was surprised that they were so cautious and didn't always speak openly, even with this security measure in place. Furthermore, El was shocked to learn that they were abducting and manipulating people to turn them into their allies. If this truth were to come to light, it would trigger a massive scandal that could bring down the entire Einhart family. The Marquis' son then promised never to speak about it again, and his father reassured him that he need not worry about the prince either, as he was also involved in the events and would not harm him. As El listened, his thoughts became more tangled. The Marquis listed all the past events. From the prince's proposals to the magical stones to El's extraordinary talent. Then the Marquis asked his son what he would do in this situation, holding the knife he had been playing with before and handing it to his son. Silfer's brother recognized that it was a test, and that he could make up for his mistake by acting smarter. Under the pressure of the situation, he took his father's knife and stated that he would first respond to the prince. He would tell the prince that he would gladly accept Silfer as his lover. Then, he would capture El to learn the method of making the magical stones from Silfer, which could be used to save El's life. His father asked if that was all he would do. With a skillful throw, the son hit the center of the target with the knife and continued explaining. Once he had the method of making the stones, he would send Silfer to the prince, whether she went willingly or not. Even if he had to use force, he would seal her ability to use magic. Elle listened in disbelief as Silfer's brother went on to explain that once his sister was with the prince, he would also subject Elle to brainwashing to make him a loyal member of the family. After that, they would show the prince a body that resembled Elle closely, claiming that he tragically died in an accident. The Marquis clapped his hands in delight, praising his son Gletton and assuring him that he was a worthy successor. They decided to proceed exactly as planned and expected to see results soon. Gletton promised to do his best to satisfy them. Elle was consumed with anger but had to hold himself together. His teeth clenched, and his hand formed into a fist. He realized that this family was even colder and more heartless than he had ever imagined. He wondered why he couldn't stop or prevent his mother's suggestion to be in a place like this. Instead, Elle realized he was intoxicated by his superiority over others and thought he wanted to make everyone happy, regardless of the circumstances. Additionally, he wanted to respect his mother's decision, and this was now the result of that. Elle could live with them trying to use him. He had already suspected something in that direction. However, he couldn't forgive them for wanting to hand his mother over to the prince. Elle grew angrier, causing him to become somewhat careless. The Marquis recognized that someone in the room was under the influence of an invisibility spell. Surprised, he wondered if this person had been here the whole time and was astonished that he hadn't noticed or recognized them. He asked aloud who was hiding in the room. Elle then extended his hand and prepared a spell. The Marquis and his son Gletton noticed the surge of magic, but they had little time to react because Elle had already finished casting his modified spell, Endless Flame Seed, and unleashed it. Elle revealed himself, which visibly surprised the Marquis and Gletton, wondering if he had overheard their entire conversation. As the spell had a slight delay, it exploded a few seconds later. The Marquis looked shocked as he realized what was about to happen. There followed a massive explosion, and a large fireball soared through the roof of the estate into the sky. Right after the first explosion, another one followed, just as big, tearing everything apart. The ground was completely scorched from the tremendous explosions, and ashes and smoke filled the air. However, the Marquis and his son didn't appear to have any visible direct injuries from the explosion. The Marquis was astonished at the spell Elle had cast. Any other magician would need more than half an hour to execute such a spell. Furthermore, it was a 7th-level spell, effortlessly capable of killing thousands of people at once. Immediately after the explosion, guards of the family estate rushed into the room where the two family heads were and inquired if everything was all right and who was responsible. Looking down at the small crowd of soldiers and the two leaders, Elle was surprised that they were still alive. One of the soldiers recognized him and said he was obviously Silfer's son. Elle floated slightly in the air and said he was glad they were still alive, as his anger was too great to end their lives so quickly. Once again, Elle extended his hand, not giving them much opportunity to react. Under his palm, a small orb formed, surrounded by a magical circle. Elle told the small group standing below him that he wanted to ensure they would suffer endless torment and beg for forgiveness, repenting their deeds for daring to raise their filthy hands against his family. He raised his hand, and the small orb expanded into a large magical circle behind him. Elle invoked a summoning spell, declaring that misery and destruction awaited those who stood in his way. His eyes were filled with focus and hatred towards the individuals present. He completed his summoning, and his night golem in golden armor emerged from its interdimensional space. Standing behind Elle. The guards couldn't believe what they were seeing, wondering how such a creature could be present here. The Marquis started laughing, prompting Gletton to ask if everything was all right and why he was laughing. With gleaming eyes that hadn't quite grasped the current situation and a brain the size of a pea, oblivious to how dire the situation looked for him, the Marquis stated it was great and the best thing he had ever seen. The few guards who mustered their courage didn't believe the golem was real and vowed in the name of the Einhart family that they wouldn't let Elle do as he pleased and tried to push back the golem. They rushed towards Elle and his golem. Through the slits in the golem's helmet, A small bright light blinked, signaling it was fully operational. With a single quick but incredibly powerful strike, the golem attacked the guards who dared to charge at El, sending them flying into the air. Glutton couldn't believe what was unfolding before his eyes and seemed to have an even smaller brain than his father. He looked down at the falling bodies lying motionless on the ground, succumbing to the injuries inflicted by the golem's attack. Frenziedly, the Marquis declared it was undoubtedly not a fake and stated that his family could now become the strongest family ever, with such a golem on their side. He pointed at El with his finger and ordered the new guards who had gathered behind him to kill El and force him to reveal the secret of the golems. El's facial expression remained terrifying, clearly indicating that he hadn't shown everything he was capable of. He told the Marquis that everything he knew served only greed. Moreover, he pointed out that the Marquis already lived an extravagant lifestyle and questioned if he didn't have enough money for retirement and why he would want more. The Marquis looked visibly confused. El floated next to his golem, observing the attacking guards in the devastated, charred ground. Another magical circle hovered in front of his golem, deflecting the attacks directed at him. El began positioning himself behind his golem and channeling more of his mana into it. As a result, his mana spread out in waves around him, pushing back all the present individuals slightly. The guards recognized the extreme power of this mana and realized they couldn't contend with it. Even Glutton had to defend himself somewhat against the mana controlled by El through his golem. The Marquis was also surprised and realized that this mana couldn't belong to someone who had just mastered the 5th stage of magic. It seemed to be on par with that of a sword master, perhaps even stronger. He remembered how he had examined El's mana during their first encounter at noon and pieced a few things together. He realized that El must be the mage who had caused the 2 massive explosions. He pondered if it was possible that El was actually on the 7th stage of magic. When El realized that the Marquis had finally figured out how strong he truly was, he couldn't help but grin self-assuredly. The Marquis grew angry, clasped his hands together, and prepared a spell as well. Shortly after, he launched his spell at El, who appeared completely unfazed, continuing to float in the air without being disturbed. Calmly, El raised his hand, channeled some mana, and effortlessly created a spell to repel the attack. The ground beneath him burned, and flames raged on the battlefield. Once again, El looked down from above at his grandfather and uncle, realizing that they were unworthy of being called that. Just as El was about to say what the Marquis intended to do to them, he heard his name as only his mother called him, Ellie, on the battlefield. His mother, now joined by his sisters Serena and Kana, looked up in disbelief at El and couldn't believe what she saw. She asked him what had happened. El looked sadly down at his mother and called her name. He wondered why she was here and didn't want her to find out what was happening and the terrible plan her brother and father had for her. El still floated in the air, looking down at the 2 family heads, his sisters, and his mother. Lost in thought, he couldn't help but recall the plan his mother's brother had devised to extract information about the magic stones from him and what he intended to do with his mother afterward. He also thought about how their father, as the family head, applauded and praised him for it. El's mother shouted up to him again, asking him to please respond. She saw how angry El looked and realized she had never seen him so furious, knowing that something must have happened to make her son so agitated. El continued to silently gaze at his mother and his siblings, then let out a deep sigh, realizing he had no other choice now. Once again, he raised his hand and formed a small sphere with many magical circles rotating around it. These magical circles grew larger and pulsated outward. The Marquis recognized this as capture magic. He was alarmed, wondering if El had recorded the conversation he had with his son where they had hatched their plan. If that were the case, he knew his family was doomed, and no one should ever hear those plans. Panicking, the Marquis quickly turned to his son Glutton and ordered him to kill El immediately, explaining that he was the one who had caused the explosions just now. Angrily, and because she hadn't received an answer from her son, Silver asked her father what was going on and why he was ordering El's death without reason. He told her to shut up. The Marquis found himself in a predicament and took a moment to adjust to the situation and think. Silver told him that El was his grandson, appealing to his good heart, hoping he would reconsider killing him. However, the Marquis seemed unfazed and instructed his guards and his son to hurry. He warned them that El was a high-ranking mage. The guards once again stood in a larger group before El, pointing their swords at him and preparing for battle. El appeared relatively unfazed and simply commanded his golem to overpower the guards without killing them. The golem extended its hand, conjuring a golden sword and assuring its master that it understood and accepted the command, and would execute it to the best of its abilities. The summoned sword of his slightly plump golem shone as brightly as the sun and sparkled like the stars in the night sky. He held it in his left hand while El floated slightly to the side to give his plump golem some space. The morale of the guards and warriors of the Einhart family had not been broken. Together, they raised their swords and proudly shouted their battle cry. Their first mission was to destroy the summoned sword. However, El knew that this endeavor was impossible, for the golden sword was a symbol of his golem. It was forged from pure dwarven steel with very few impurities and coated with magical metal for enchanted seals. The front of the blade was also coated in gold and imbued with a spell to deflect impact upon striking. Moreover, it had been reinforced with a special sharpening magic to further enhance its existing power. Thus, the golden sword resembled more of a divine sword than a mere one. El realized that, much like in his previous life, it was essential to regularly upgrade his strongest unit to keep it effective. He was more realistic than idealistic and knew he had to push his golem's capabilities to their limits. The guards and knights of the Einhart family remained in their battle formation, continuing to point their swords at El and his golem while channeling their energy. El's golem swung its flame-enchanted sword, creating a massive golden shockwave that broke through the ranks of knights, forcing them to defend against the backlash of the swing. Even the Marquis and Gletton could not believe what they were seeing, astonished by the power of El's slightly plump golden golem. One of the guards warned not to underestimate it, assuming his battle stance once again. The golem executed a golden cut and flew towards the army of guards, splitting the sword in two and disrupting their combat formation. The golden golem continued to build up, and its shadow loomed over the heads of the guards. Seeing the golem up close, they realized its true size and the overwhelming force they were truly facing. However, some guards had not given up hope and urged their comrades to obey their master's orders absolutely, not to panic or give up. Another guard caught sight, after his friend's brave words, of their fighter who had managed to ride onto the battlefield inside the house on a horse. His horse was also adorned with lightweight golden armor, and he himself was dressed in a silver, typical knight's armor, embellished with a red cape. El recognized that this knight must be the leader and captain of the knights. Furthermore, he realized that this captain should be at the end of the swordmaster rank. The captain knelt before the Marquis and apologized for arriving late. However, the Marquis urged him to get to work immediately and defeat El and his golem. The knight captain raised his head, said he would do so right away, saluted, lowered the visor of his helmet, and introduced himself. He explained that he was the knight captain of the Marquis Einhart family and drew his sword. He enveloped his sword with a kind of mana, raised it, and thus boosted the morale of his subordinate knights. He called out to them that they would now destroy the enemy together. El recognized that things were about to get more serious, but he spoke quietly and calmly to his golden golem, asking it to switch to its level 2 mode. The golem responded that its seal had been successfully lifted and covered itself in golden light. First, its hands and arms became slightly slimmer, followed by its shoulders, head, and finally the rest of its body. It now looked much more flexible, faster, and stronger, ready to continue defending El. Additionally, since it was now somewhat thinner, it appeared even more fearsome and aggressive. The guards who had risen against El and his golem knight were surprised by the sudden transformation. However, El already knew that this wasn't all that had changed about his golem and that the real change was yet to come. As the sword had disappeared during its transformation, the golem had to call it again, and it reappeared, enveloped in flames, in its hand. It grabbed the sword and prepared for battle, assuming a combat position as well. The blade of the sword had undergone some changes and was infused with much more energy than before. The leader of the knights realized that it must be an aura blade, which was the actual much more powerful power-up. El's golem swung its sword to the side and stepped forward without apparent protection, heading towards the army facing it. The captain did the same, also swinging his sword, and asked if he looked so weak that he could approach without any cover. He also claimed that even if the golem now had an aura blade, it still posed no threat to him. Both prepared for a strike and simultaneously clashed their swords, causing a tremendous recoil and shaking the ground. The impact of the two swords illuminated the surroundings, forcing everyone involved to shield their eyes from the bright light. Only El continued to watch the spectacle, completely focused, and still filled with immense hatred towards the Marquis and his son, Gledon. As the bright light from the clash of swords dissipated, the knight captain was left bleeding, while El's golem stood before him unharmed. The bloodied blade of the knight captain was lodged in the ground, and he succumbed to his injuries, falling to the floor. He couldn't believe what had just happened and that he had been defeated. His injuries were so severe that he died in that moment. The guards standing under him couldn't fathom how their leader had been easily taken out with a single strike and lay on the ground. This visibly shook the morale of the army. However, the golem didn't pause and immediately launched into the next attack. It swung its sword, unleashing a flaming energy blade, and once again attacked the Marquis, Gledon, and the army standing behind them. The Marquis managed to shield himself and his son with a protective spell that intercepted the golem's attack. However, the attack was so powerful that the shield only held up once before shattering. Nonetheless, the army behind them was still hit by the attack, and soldiers were sent flying across the battlefield. The Marquis and Gledon were forced to look down at the bodies of their guards and realize that these weak guards had died too easily and quickly. El also noticed that reinforcements for the family heads were approaching again, and he saw some mages in black robes moving forward on the battlefield. However, this didn't surprise him, as the Einhart family was known to possess an army as vast as a mage tower. Nevertheless, he wasn't willing to let the matter rest and was already planning his next moves. Before he could put these plans into action, he turned to his mother and summoned a sphere containing his recorded memories. He explained to her what he intended to do with it and asked if she was ready to see the truth. She replied that she was indeed prepared and knew that her son El had a good reason for acting the way he was right now. She understood that something important must be contained within her son's memories, prompting him to attack the entire Einhart family, including her father and brother. El handed her the small sphere with his memories, and the Marquis observed this. However, he knew he had to intervene, and his daughter mustn't see it under any circumstances. He glanced at El's golem and realized he couldn't get past it, as the golem's abilities far surpassed his own. Only one of the 10 grandmasters should currently be able to do something against this golem. Anything else would be impossible. Furthermore, he realized that even if El were a 7th-tier mage, he and Gledon, along with the family's magicians, only had a slim chance of stopping him. Desperately, he understood that even if he managed to escape and elude El, his own family, which he had built up with his own hands and strengthened at any cost, would be destroyed. El cast a protective spell to shield his mother from external influences, allowing her to peacefully observe her son's memories. Magical circles appeared around El, as with any other spell. His mother was then enclosed in a square cube meant to protect her from all dangers. Panicked, Serena and Kana called out to their mother, but they couldn't see the interior of the cube as its walls were obscured. Meanwhile, Silver held El's memories in her hand, and they expanded around her. She saw the memory of her father and brother discussing the prince's letter and deciding to present her as his lover. Additionally, she realized that the Einhart family had abducted many promising talents from other countries and subjected them to brainwashing to serve the family loyally. She came to understand that the prince was aware of all this and involved as well. Then she saw the memory in which her own brother explained his plan to their father, which involved delivering Silver against her will to the prince. Perhaps they intended to seal her magic and capture Elle, and then use him as leverage to force her to reveal the method of making the magic stones. Silver couldn't believe how shocking these revelations in Elle's memories were for her. Through further memories, she learned that her father and brother also planned to subject Elle to brainwashing to make him loyal and show the prince a different body resembling Elle's to fake his death. When Silver saw her own father praising her brother for such a plan, she clasped her hands over her head, and her world crumbled. She was on the verge of tears and fell to the ground. She tried to hold back her emotions, recalling the first words her father said to her upon her return, expressing regret for sending her away. She had thought that deep down, her father still retained some familial feelings for her and that they were still father and daughter. However, Silver couldn't hold back her tears any longer and let her emotions flow freely. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she wept. She couldn't help but think about how happy she was with her son, Elle, and that she should have known better than anyone how terrible this family truly was. She now blamed herself for bringing her beloved son here. Thoughts of her father and her brother came back to her, and she realized that there was not a hint of warmth or love in this family, only wicked individuals. She thought that she should be indifferent to how these wicked people would use her however they pleased. But now, knowing that they not only wanted to use her but also planned to subject her son, Elle, to brainwashing, she couldn't simply forgive them as she initially wanted, even though they had already killed her beloved husband. She recognized that she had never truly hated them for that because she always believed that the prince had forced them to do it. However, now she realized that this was not the truth, it was simply that these people knew no love or family, and they acted purely out of self-interest. Silver bit her lip hard, trying to forget her inner pain and pull herself together. She clenched her fists and also realized that for her father, her brother, and the prince, everyone else was nothing more than tools to increase their own power. Silver understood that this was the true nature of these people, which she unfortunately never fully realized before, but now she knew. When she came to terms with what had happened and gathered her courage, the cube that had imprisoned her for protection began to glow and shattered. Elle looked a little sad, knowing that it wasn't easy for his mother to accept the truth. His mother folded her hands, with a few tears still in her eyes. However, she made the decision that no matter how painful it might be now and no matter how much she wished to forget everything, it was essential to accept the truth. Serena immediately called out to her mother, who was floating in the air, to ensure she was okay. Her mother landed and was ready to face reality and confront it. With a determined expression and a clenched fist, she told her son that she would no longer run away and was prepared to fight. Elle looked down at his mother, relieved by her resolution and her ability to withstand the truth. He also noticed that a few tears were still running down her cheeks and that, despite everything their family had done, she didn't succumb to hatred because they were still a part of her family. However, this was not the case for Elle, and he gazed back at the Marquis and his son, Gletton, with all his hatred and anger, as they still stood together on the battlefield, doing nothing to change their situation. Elle raised his hand into the air and conjured another magical circle, which looked slightly different from his previous ones. He wanted to show the Marquis and Gletton the Iron Mace of Justice. A large black phoenix, engulfed in black flames, appeared before the magical red circle. The phoenix immediately started screeching loudly, causing the guards and the rest of the Einhart family's army to cover their ears as the sound was too deafening. Even Gletton had to shield his ears and couldn't withstand Elle's magic. The Marquis realized that Elle had employed sound force magic to lower the morale of his subjects and that Elle was even capable of overwhelming his son, who was also at the 7th level of magic, using this magic, despite Gletton being at the 5th level. Then, the Marquis looked up at Elle with his glowing red eyes and used a magic that directly infiltrated Elle's mind. Elle heard a voice in his head praising him, saying that he had done well with what he had done. The voice lauded his great talent and assured him that it wasn't too late and he could still join the family. However, Elle remained entirely unimpressed and rather bored. The Marquis greedily eyed El and continued with his magic, attempting to manipulate El further with his voice. He claimed that it was a great loss not to welcome someone as talented as El into his family. Furthermore, he offered El a deal: if he switched sides, the Marquis could arrange for his family to forget everything that had happened that day. They could lead a normal life, and he would guarantee the safety of El's mother and his two sisters. Then he asked El what he thought about this idea. El still looked down at the Marquis, feeling a strange sensation as he heard the voice in his head. He wondered if this was the brainwashing spell. Floating in the air, El couldn't believe that the evil old man not only wanted to enchant his father, the other magicians, and his mother but was now attempting it on him as well. El addressed the Marquis and asked him a question. As the Marquis looked up at El from below, he realized that his brainwashing spell had no effect on him and that El was indeed at the 7th level of magic. In response to El's question about how he could do something so cruel to his own family, the Marquis was initially taken aback and briefly shocked, but then he began to laugh. He raised his hands up and laughed like an old comic book villain. The Marquis explained to El that many aristocrats would sell their own children for the sake of the family, and that this was actually a normal thing. El continued to look down at him and realized that this man was no longer human but more like a monster. The Marquis then asked El where he had learned such magic and praised him for reaching the 7th level at the age of 17, which was an impressive achievement. El understood that he was actually speaking to a monster, only interested in extracting his secrets. He floated down a bit, still above the Marquis, and told him that he had learned everything on his own and no one else had taught him these skills. The Marquis couldn't believe it and expressed his doubts. However, El reiterated that this was the truth, and he had truly learned everything by himself. The Marquis still didn't want to believe him and stated that it didn't seem like he would learn the truth from him. In response, El said that he detested and hated people like the Marquis the most, people who viewed their family as tools and treated them accordingly. Nevertheless, El raised his hand and made a proposal to the Marquis. Curiously, the Marquis asked what it was. El asked him if he would be allowed to leave with his family and spread the truth about what he, Glutton, and the prince had done. In that case, the Marquis would be in trouble. The Marquis wanted to know where El was going with this. El held a small golden coin in his hand and explained that this coin contained his memories, which he had captured using his magic. The Marquis was shocked. El knew that this truth would threaten the Einhart family, but he also realized that the fact that the prince was involved in the kidnapping and brainwashing was equally severe. If it came to light that the prince was involved, countless battles against the kingdom would be waged by various families, which could possibly lead to the downfall of the mighty kingdom of Bliard. El looked at the coin and saw the reflection of the Marquis and his son. He said that they could prevent him from spreading this information and thus the truth by fighting against each other without interference from outsiders. He explained that he believed he could only feel better if they had an honest fight with each other. He also assured them that if they managed to defeat him, he would destroy the coin and disappear. The Marquis told his son to prepare himself, leaving the son somewhat shocked as he turned to his father, not quite understanding what was going on. The Marquis explained to his son that it would be more advantageous for them to attack simultaneously and urged them to do their best. His son had the same insane grin on his face as his father and agreed. El looked down at his two opponents and realized that it was time to get serious. He touched his head with a finger and used some magic. Then he prepared for an attack, holding an orb in his hand. He told the Marquis and his son that they were underestimating him greatly and angrily fired his magic at them, showing them what desperation feels like. However, the Marquis and Glutton were able to directly counter El's first attack with a counterspell that looked much darker than the spell El had cast. When the two spells collided, there was another tremendous explosion. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a person knelt before their king and greeted him. The king told the person that they probably had already heard, but still informed them that there were witnesses reporting the use of 7th-level magic. The man with red hair, Duke Clion, who was kneeling before his king, confirmed that he had also heard about it. The king explained that this was a very serious matter, and if a member of the Einhart family was responsible for the 7th level magic and the resulting explosion due to an experiment, he would hold them personally responsible. However, he added that if there were problems in the Marquis residence, he should leave them there as long as possible and only then address the situation. The red-haired man asked why he should intervene at the end. To which his king explained that the Einhart family had become far too powerful, and this was a good opportunity to weaken them a bit again. Duke Client agreed with his king and thought that His Majesty was a very intimidating man. He knew that his king had spoken with the Marquis of the Einhart family back then and had told him that in an empire, there must always be a sufficiently strong opposing force, and had secretly helped the Marquis of Einhart come to power. But now, with the Marquis becoming much more powerful than he had planned, the king wanted to try to damage him a bit to minimize his influence. Duke Client had expected nothing less from his king, who ruled over everything. The king told the duke that he would lend him 10 men from his royal knights and 100 men from the Central Knight Order, knowing that the duke would lead and deploy them properly. He entrusted the mission entirely to the duke. The duke looked up and accepted the assignment he had received, intending to carry it out to the best of his ability. As he was about to take his leave, another person joined the conversation. It was Prince Al-Qaid. The king asked the prince what he wanted. The prince said he would like to ask a favor and inquired if he had heard correctly that the duke was now heading to the Marquis of Einhart. The duke confirmed this immediately. The prince then asked if he could accompany him. Expressing the desire to seize the opportunity to diminish the Marquis' influence and power. He looked at the duke and the king with a conflicted expression, as his real goal in this journey was Silver. He wanted to ensure that he would take advantage of this opportunity to win her over. The king asked the prince if he believed he could handle the Einhart family and overpower them. The prince responded to the king's question, saying that he thought he could handle it and that it would be a good experience for him. The king granted permission and told both the duke and the prince to proceed cautiously to the Einhart estate. Both understood the order and prepared to ride out. They were each on their horses. The duke and the prince. The prince told the duke that he was already excited to work with him. The duke replied that now that the prince was joining his mission, he wasn't sure if he had anything left to do. The prince laughed amiably and agreed with the duke's words. However, Client was still unsure about the prince accompanying him and looked at him questioningly from behind. The prince shouted loudly for everyone to show their enthusiasm, prompting the knights accompanying the prince and the duke to cheer loudly and display their eagerness. They set off for the Einhart family estate to investigate and weaken the Marquis' power. Meanwhile, the battle between the Marquis, Gletton, and El continued, and the earth trembled repeatedly. El was still hovering in the air, in the process of creating a cosmic hand with his magic, ready to attack the Marquis. However, the Marquis laughed in the face of the danger posed by El's spell and was astonished by how fast and powerful El's spells were. As El continued his attack towards the Marquis, the latter couldn't help but think that usually none of his opponents got the chance to launch an attack against him, as he would have defeated them the moment they prepared a spell. Gletton was in the process of preparing a spell, lifting his fingers like in Naruto and chanting an incantation. Runes appeared around him, forming a magical circle of fire magic around his fingers. Shortly after, he cast the spell, Flame Storm, and sent it towards El. Smiling, he was curious to see how El would handle his attack. Gletton was quite arrogant, proud that he could cast this 6th-class magic so quickly. El prepared to counter the attack and also used magic to create a massive earth wall to block Gletton's swirling fire attack. The Marquis, still unaware that he shouldn't engage in battle with El, took the opportunity to use his light magic, Lightning Arrow, and attack El. However, El effortlessly countered the Marquis' magic with a few deft steps and repelled his attack. Now it was El's turn to strike back. He extended both hands forward, creating a magical circle around them that formed a kind of magical armor around El's body. El controlled the elements of fire, light, wind, water, and earth magic around him, similar to the Avatar from Avatar, The Last Airbender. He combined these magics and hurled a few stones at the Marquis and Gletton, who couldn't believe what they were seeing. But El wanted to show more and took it further by using the same technique as his uncle Gletton and launching a second attack directly at the Marquis and Gletton without giving them a chance to counter. Gletton couldn't believe his eyes. He was surprised that El only needed to see his secret technique once and could now use it even faster than him. This was a technique that set him apart from other magicians on the same level, as he could execute it in a flash and defeat his opponents despite being on the same level. He cursed but still managed to cast a defensive spell and shielded himself with 3 magical barriers to counter El's attack. However, the flames were too strong and destroyed each shield. Just before they could reach Gletton, he managed to teleport to safety, evading the flames. Gletton teleported high into the air and then planned to surprise El and launch a counterattack. Gletton, however, couldn't locate El's position and frantically looked left and right to find his opponent. Suddenly, El appeared behind his uncle and told him that he was way too slow and would never surprise him as he just did. Gletton turned around and saw El, realizing that he was moving much too quickly. El extended his hand again, preparing to finish off his uncle. Shocked, Gletton used magic again and swiftly flew to the ground to escape El's grasp. El cast a sort of Japanese, hentai, spell, with tentacle-like magical manifestations trying to ensnare his uncle. He remarked that his uncle was far too slow and wouldn't have a chance to escape at that speed. The Marquis recognized the spell El was casting and knew that the net spell was meant to restrict the opponent's movements, but he also knew that his son would handle such a spell with ease. Gletton raised his finger, releasing a small orb that generated a whirlwind of fire, pushing back the net-like tentacles. Gletton was confident that such a spell wouldn't do much against him. El then charged towards Gletton with his magic, but Gletton continued to defend against El's attack with his fire magic. The Marquis observed the spectacle from a safe distance and was pleased that El's tentacle net attack had failed, knowing that net magic was at a disadvantage against fire magic. He smugly grinned. Meanwhile, El and Gletton continued their intense battle, with neither willing to give in. Gletton was clearly on the defensive, while El, who had to conserve some of his powers and couldn't fight as ruthlessly as his opponents, was on the offensive. The Marquis saw another opportunity to launch a surprise attack. The sky darkened, and lightning flashed through the dark clouds. The Marquis extended his hand toward the sky, and mage runes formed around it again. He praised his son for holding El back, allowing him to prepare his spell. Everything was going exactly as he had planned. He looked to the sky, confident that the next attack would defeat El. When he was ready, the Marquis shouted, "Thunderstrike!" And a massive bolt of lightning crashed through the cloud cover, heading straight for El. Gletton and the Marquis had already put on the victorious smile, knowing it should be over any moment. The lightning continued to approach El, who stood motionless and made no attempt to defend against it. He faced the lightning with the same look as a deer facing car headlights at night. But at the last moment, he grinned and summoned a massive lightning rod using his magic, intercepting the entire lightning bolt before it could touch him, rendering the Marquis' attack completely ineffective. The Marquis couldn't believe it and found it impossible what had just happened before his eyes. It made no sense to him. El told him that his attack wasn't bad, and he had indeed surprised him. Still unable to believe that El had successfully defended against his thunderstrike, the Marquis asked what kind of magic it was. El then turned around and asked him with a smile on his face why he should reveal it to him. He said it would be foolish to share such important and valuable information with his enemy. This arrogance, the grin, and the fact that he couldn't harness that power infuriated the Marquis. El looked at his lightning rod with pride, realizing that it was highly effective, successfully absorbing all the light magic. He knew that normally, fire magic is considered the opposite of water magic. But as a defensive method, water magic wasn't very effective, as fire magic could boil the water and burn the water magic user. From a young age, El had conducted a lot of research because he was curious about the different types of magic. He discovered that the best way to counter fire magic was with earth magic, and water magic could be best fought with plant magic. Against wind magic, stone or iron magic would be most effective. Only what to use against lightning magic had puzzled him, as it was more complicated than the other types of magic. He knew that weak lightning magic could be easily stopped by stone or iron magic, but if it were strong lightning magic, simple stones or iron wouldn't suffice. That was when he remembered his old readings about lightning rods in his world. This was the first time El had tried this kind of magic, and for a first attempt, the result was impressive. It had worked perfectly, neutralizing a 7th level lightning spell. El took the opportunity to look down at Gletton, who was also surprised that El had countered his father's magic with his unknown magic. For a second, Gletton forgot that he was in the midst of a life-and-death battle. El seized the moment and shouted to Gletton that this would be his end. He conjured his cosmic hand again, which appeared from a portal right in front of Gletton and delivered a powerful slap, sending him flying to the ground. Defeated and bloodied. The Marquis looked shocked at his son lying on the ground and couldn't quite grasp what had just happened when El already declared that it was now a one-on-one fight. El looked down at Gletton and realized that he would likely be bedridden for a year and unable to move. He pointed at the Marquis and told him that he would be next. El used his flame arrow magic, creating a large number of magical arrows in the night sky, illuminating it, and ready to descend upon the Marquis. Fearfully, the Marquis held his hands forward, realizing that El's magic was no joke, and his situation was more serious than ever before. He tried to cast a shield like he did before to defend against El's attack and then countered with his flame burst spell, hurling it directly towards El. However, El easily deflected this spell as well and responded with his Infinity Magic Arrow spell. He created arrows in the sky, directly targeting the ground beneath him, only much smaller, but as the name suggests, an infinite number of them. El explained to the Marquis that although these arrows might be smaller and weaker individually, their infinite quantity made them extremely powerful. The Marquis didn't know how to respond and simply looked amazed into the air. As the arrows descended upon him, he once again used a shield magic to protect himself. El's arrows rained down, one after another, on the Marquis's shield, visibly putting it under pressure and pushing him back. The arrows kept coming, and the shield was on the verge of giving in to the enormous strain. Even in his current situation, the Marquis couldn't believe he was struggling against such inferior magic. He wondered how he could be struggling so hard against a second-rate magician and realized that he was supposed to be called the most powerful magician on the continent. He looked at El and realized that he was merely fighting against a 17-year-old child. Suddenly, an idea came to the Marquis, and he questioned whether El was really only 17 years old. He thought that this understanding of magic and these sophisticated strategies should come from someone much more experienced and older. He wondered if this might be a prank by another great magician. He had no way of knowing that El was already in his second life and had lived a previous life as Kim Jun-sung. He looked at El and wondered who he could be and why his family had been completely destroyed thanks to him, and cursed him. Finally, the Marquis's shield broke like a shattered mirror into many small pieces. He looked through these shards and saw El's attack still coming towards him. The many arrows continued their path, and now they finally hit their target. The Marquis bled from several direct hits and fell back to the ground, lying there defeated and bloodied, just like his son. His guards couldn't believe what had just happened before their eyes and called out the Marquis' name to see if he was still conscious. Finally, El landed on the ground. His anger had not subsided, and he looked at the fallen Marquis with rage and hatred. He said that he wouldn't kill him and his son, as it wouldn't be an appropriate punishment for them. Instead, he wanted to take away their ability to use magic, just as they had intended to do with his beloved mother. The weight bearing down on the Marquis increased, pressing him further into the ground. El explained that he wouldn't kill them but still wanted to inflict more harm upon them. Runes formed around him, and he was about to unleash his spell, Bone Break, when suddenly, a loud bang echoed across the battlefield, and El came back to his senses. He turned to his mother and saw her, along with his sisters, still standing at the edge of the battlefield. El looked at his family with sorrowful eyes. At Serena, Kana, and his mother, who told him that it was enough. She asked him to stop. El wasn't sure why she said that and remained silent, gazing at his mother in astonishment. His mother knew the talent of her son and how great it was, but she could hardly believe that at the tender age of 17, he had already reached the 7th level of magic and was capable of creating such a powerful golem that managed to defeat a sword master with just one blow, something no other magician had accomplished before. She realized that her little son had grown into such a powerful magician without her knowledge. However, she also knew that the person El was fighting against was her father. And even though she couldn't forgive her father and brother for trying to kill El or subject him to brainwashing, she couldn't allow El to kill her father and brother either. She told El that he had taught them a lesson, and it should be enough. She didn't believe her father and brother would ever again hatch and execute such plans. In the comments, you can write how naive this mother is and how unbearable it is that she wants to stop El from killing them. However, El said that he couldn't comply with her request. He looked at Gletton and his grandfather and said that if he let them go, they would be the type of people who would come back for revenge. His mother said that might be true. But it still wouldn't be right to kill them. Furthermore, she explained to El that he still had his memory magic, with which he could prove their plans at any time, and therefore they couldn't seek revenge recklessly as long as he could use those memories against them. El contemplated and realized that his mother might be right. Additionally, he thought about how if he were to strip the Marquis of his ability to use magic, the entire kingdom would turn against them. That would mean putting his entire family in danger. El agreed with his mother and stated that he wouldn't harm her father and brother. He turned away from the fallen Marquis and told his family that they should leave this vile place as quickly as possible. Furthermore, El suggested to his mother that with her abilities and being ranked 6th in magic, they could find a place far away and lead a peaceful life. His mother agreed and desired exactly what her son wanted. Humbly and with shame, she acknowledged that El was right and had to admit that even though she was the adult between them, she was wrong. Under the full moon and the cloudy night, she had to admit her mistake in bringing El to the Marquis and said that everything was her fault, leading to the current situation. She looked into El's eyes and told him that while power might be important in life, the love within the family was much more crucial. El looked somewhat melancholy at his mother and thought about his family from his previous life but agreed with her statement that family was the most important. El pulled himself together and asked his 2 sisters if they wanted to come with them and continue to be part of this family. El's mother, Serena, and Kana were a bit puzzled as to why he would suddenly ask this when the answer was already clear. Nevertheless, Kana said she would, of course, stay with him and would go anywhere with him. Serena also said that she wanted to be with him and their new mother wherever they went. El's mother was delighted that her 2 adopted daughters wanted to stay with them and her son, and she looked quite happy. El approached his family and thanked them for their decision to accompany him. However, he still had something to do and turned around to summon his golden golem. It came directly and knelt before El, ready to receive further commands. El praised his golem for the outstanding work it had done on the battlefield and decided that it was time to give his golem an appropriate name. He named his golem Tana, and it shone in golden brilliance, expressing gratitude to its master and creator for its name. Just as El was about to use his teleportation magic and disappear with his family, a man suddenly appeared behind him and said that he couldn't allow them to leave now. El immediately turned around, and Tana was ready to confront the stranger. With lightning speed, Tana parried the attack of the unknown person trying to stop El, while El used magic to protect his family as well. The attack was fierce, and Tana had some trouble stopping it. The colliding forces grew stronger and built up until they caused an explosion, kicking up some dust. El realized that this attack was truly powerful and that the assailant couldn't be a nobody. Laughing and smug, the prince emerged from behind Duke Clion, stating that he expected nothing less from him, the captain of the royal guards. El recognized him immediately, understanding that the person next to the prince was no ordinary individual. He knew he had to step up his game to avoid losing. He called on Tana to activate the third mode. The golem, just previously defending against another attack from Duke Client to protect El and his family, broke another of its seals upon El's command, activating its third stage. Tana raised a hand and effortlessly blocked Duke Client's attack. He even managed to push back the Duke and the Prince slightly. However, when Client noticed that he was being forced into a defensive position, he halted his assault and curiously asked El who he was. He was amazed and acknowledged El's talent, but also pointed out that someone with such talent should normally fight on the kingdom's side. Client explained to El that he had attacked the Einhart family and their leaders, who were vital to the kingdom. This act was akin to declaring war directly against the kingdom. El listened to Duke Client without appearing to resist. The Duke continued, stating that he didn't really want a conflict with him but felt he had no other choice given the circumstances. At this point, the prince interrupted and questioned what he was saying. Pointing at El, he asserted that they couldn't let these traitors escape so easily and should punish them with death to protect the dignity of their beloved kingdom. The prince greedily grinned, his mind solely focused on reaching his ultimate goal, making El's mother, Silfer, his own. El angrily clenched his fist, immediately recognizing the prince's true intentions and knowing that everything was merely a ploy to make his beloved mother his lover. As the moon slowly disappeared behind thick clouds, El told Duke Client that he needed to apologize, but he had no intention of joining the kingdom. He stated, while pointing angrily at the prince, that he would destroy him now. He ordered Tana to keep Duke Client busy until he could accomplish this, which the golem immediately understood and was ready to carry out. Tana channeled golden energy into her hand again and summoned the golden sword, which somehow always disappeared whenever another of its seals was broken. Duke Client and Tana faced each other, preparing for battle. Client told her that he was ready and she could attack first. El floated in the air, focusing his attention on the prince. He made it clear that he would be his opponent, impressively manipulating the mana around him to strengthen it for his next attack. With intense concentration on the battlefield and the prince, El stated that they should begin. This unsettled the prince. El also reminded him that he had already warned him not to stare at his mother with his dirty, vile eyes. Since the prince disregarded this warning, El couldn't forgive him. Silfer screamed her son's name from below, causing El to turn around and ask his mother what she wanted now. She pleaded with him to let it be and to walk away as it was too dangerous to confront and fight the prince. El attentively listened to his mother and reassured her that they shouldn't worry because he already had a plan. He explained that it would also be too dangerous to let the prince go unpunished. Then, he shifted his focus to the soldiers on the ground, along with the duke and the prince on the battlefield. He raised his hand and invoked his spell, Infinity Magic Arrow, once more. Many small arrows appeared in the sky under the symbol of infinity, targeting the prince and his guards. El knew that a warrior who had reached the rank of swordmaster had trained his body to act as armor and wouldn't behave like that of an ordinary person or mage. With a smooth gesture, El commanded the arrows of his magic to rain down on his opponents. The guards defended themselves by holding their hands above their heads and slightly ducking to fend off the arrows. However, El realized that this attack wasn't meant to cause significant harm but rather to disrupt their formation. Swiftly, he conjured a large hammer and attacked the prince to disorient him. The prince could only marvel as El suddenly appeared before him and struck him. With a powerful and critical hit, El swung his hammer, directly impacting the prince, sending him flying far away and visibly inflicting damage. In the end, the prince and his guards were lying on the ground, bleeding and groaning from the severe injuries they sustained. El rested his massive hammer on his shoulder, realizing that this attack should have caused significant internal wounds to the prince. He knew that external wounds could be easily healed with divine magic. But the inner wounds would take more time to successfully mend. Duke Client was still engaged in combat with Tana but still managed to ask, upon seeing the prince defeated, how he was doing. Duke Clion wanted to help the prince but also realized that if he was distracted for even a second, he would be seriously endangered, as Tana was an honorable adversary for him. Tana gained the upper hand in the fight, pushing the Duke further into a defensive position. Just as it seemed Tana would win the battle, El commanded her to stop and return to the interdimensional space. Tana immediately understood her master's command and signaled this with a brief upward glance from her eyes through the slit in her helmet. Tana glowed and was about to vanish into the interdimensional space when the Duke yelled that he wouldn't let her escape so easily and launched another attack. Many small magical sword blades appeared around him, aiming at Tana, who was still in the process of vanishing. The Duke's swords flew at lightning speed towards her and struck her all over her body. There was a critical hit on her arm, causing it to fall off and crash to the ground. The Duke laughed with satisfaction as he realized that his attack had an effect on the golem. However, not even a full second later, Tana's arm reappeared on her body. She moved it around to ensure it was properly attached. The Duke looked somewhat surprised and couldn't help but curse. Tana glowed brighter and vanished as El had ordered. Although the Duke admitted defeat in this battle, he chuckled for a moment, sighed with relief, and had to admit that he thought he had her with the last attack, only to realize she had vanished with the blink of an eye. Then, the Duke looked over at El, who held the memory coin in his hand. El extracted the memories from the coin and created a copy in the form of a small orb. He looked at the newly created orb and explained that he would destroy the coin but had made a copy of it before. As the unconscious prince lay in the background, in pain, bleeding, and groaning on the ground, El stated that everything he had done was contained within this memory magic. He emphasized that he wouldn't hesitate to spread this information throughout the kingdom or even the entire continent if the Duke or his family ever tried to harm him again. His mother and sisters ran to him and were relieved that everything had turned out well and that he wasn't hurt. El turned to Duke Clion and apologized for the disturbance and inconvenience. As he used his magic and the runes of his teleportation spell appeared around him, he told the Duke that he hoped they would never meet as enemies again and bid him farewell. The Duke could still hardly believe that El was truly the villain and could only stare in astonishment as he watched him teleport away with his family. Duke Clion was not a bad person and also admitted that El was truly a genius, wishing he had met him under different circumstances. As he carefully observed the battlefield and saw the injured knights, he pondered how to explain the situation and plan his next steps. The incident at the Marquis residence was subsequently covered up. However, news of the appearance of a very young mage and his golden knight golem, as powerful as a grandmaster, spread across the entire continent, shocking all nations. It was a shocking debut for El in this world. So, some time passed, and El and his family settled into a new small cottage on the edge of a mountain, spending some time in peace and tranquility. Without any power-hungry tyrants. The sun shone, smoke rose from the chimney, and the overall atmosphere was extremely calm. El tapped his index finger on the table, contemplating what he would do next while trying to stow a book into the subspace bag. He realized that he had literally destroyed the Einhard estate, defeated his uncle and grandfather, and inflicted severe internal and external injuries on the prince. He acknowledged that he had committed these crimes and wouldn't be able to return to Banzark, where he originally intended to come with his mother, without causing further harm. El opened the window and saw the bright sun outside. He couldn't even blame the kingdom if they pursued and killed him here and now. However, he knew they would never do that because he still had his memory magic, which could prove their dark deeds. Moreover, as he stood by the window and enjoyed the tranquility, he realized that he had learned a lot during the fight. His spell casting time, the time he needed to prepare his spells, and his ability to combine spells were better than that of any other mage on the continent. He was also confident that he would become even stronger if he learned a few support spells. He also recognized the amazing potential of Tana, his golden knight golem. He recalled that he had managed to overpower even the Grandmaster Duke and briefly gain the upper hand. The last 5 years of hard work he had invested in his skills and his golem had not been in vain and would finally bear fruit. It was definitely worth putting so much effort into himself and his golem. He knew that if he could produce more of them, he might be able to conquer the whole world with such an army. However, he was also aware that it would take 3 years to create such a golem, and the cost of such production was very high and couldn't be easily borne. Additionally, El realized that the most important lesson he had learned from the battle against the Marquis and his son was that the power of a group exceeds that of an individual and that there were things he couldn't handle alone. In such cases, he had to accept help. After the fight, as rumors about El spread throughout the world, many nations began to hire people to search for him. El was sure that some of these individuals were not necessarily friendly and had evil intentions. He rested his face on his hands, contemplating that he would need to further develop himself before these people could reach him. However, he didn't yet know how to achieve that. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and as El turned around, his mother asked if she could come in. He said she could, inviting her into his room. She entered along with his 2 sisters, Serena and Kana. Serena and Kana looked relatively happy, but his mother seemed somewhat agitated and had a sad expression. El asked what was wrong, knowing that since the incident, everyone had been a bit awkward and needed time to digest what had happened. His mother nervously played with her hands and hesitantly asked her son how long he had been so strong. El explained that he had hidden his strength because he knew nobody would believe that he could have reached such a level at such a young age. He also told his mother that he had been afraid of putting her in danger if the wrong people found out how powerful he really was. He didn't want to reveal more to his family, not even that he had lived another life in a different world. So, El simply said that he was still her only son, despite having such incredible power. His mother believed him and softened her saddened face. She realized that, despite everything, he was still her son. The son she had raised and who came from her beloved husband. She apologized with a happy expression and said she was sorry for treating him differently without knowing he had his own reasons. El tried to lighten the mood further, jokingly wondering what she would think if he gained many fans by sharing and revealing his identity as a genius in magic. His mother laughed and told him to stay humble. With a smile on his face, El continued to joke around with his mother, telling her and his sisters that he had something important to discuss with them. They were curious and looked at their brother, asking what was so important that he wanted to discuss it with them. Due to the incident at the Einhart family estate, which he was responsible for, El explained that they could no longer return to Banzark. He pointed to a spot on a map and said that he had been thinking about what they should do. He explained that there were a total of 5 kingdoms in the west of the Serdian continent, and many mage towers existed in that region. Furthermore, he continued, the west was divided into many smaller 100 nations, which, with a few exceptions, were mostly weak nations without many mage towers. El said with a radiant smile and full of excitement that he planned to create his own magical tower there. Kana was somewhat confused and asked if she had heard correctly, that he wanted to create his own magical tower. El explained to her that it would be a tower similar to the one they had in their hometown, where the tower master used to live. He further explained to his family that only level 7 mages would be able to create such a magical tower. Such a tower would be strong enough to kill thousands of soldiers in a war, should one break out. Consequently, nations would be willing to invest a lot of money in such a construction project. Kana marveled at the idea while her sister asked El where he intended to build such a tower. El pointed again to the map and showed his family a small place called Tolian Kingdom. Tolian Kingdom was a large place with fertile land, a large population, and a stronger military force than its neighboring countries. He raved that it was a strong nation, but it did not yet possess a mage tower. He also mentioned that the surrounding land was inhabited by monsters, and the locals suffered significant losses every year due to this fact, especially in a small place called Manticore Valley. El said that if they were to offer to destroy this place for the Tolian Kingdom, they would surely appreciate the gesture. His mother asked if he had more to tell and contemplated what she would think of the proposal. El continued by saying that the king was a good person, and the aristocrats around him trusted and believed in him. However, he also admitted that the princes were having a dispute among themselves, which the king could not resolve. El's mother asked if this was a problem. To which El replied that it was neither good nor bad but irrelevant to his plan. He knew that the princes were mages interested in power but also mentioned that a mage tower would not usually get involved in political matters, so it didn't matter. The main problem they would need to address for his plan to work were the monsters living in the Manticore Valley and the nearby Orc Forest. El was sure that the military force of the Tolian Kingdom would be sufficient to deal with the Orc Forest, but if they were to focus all their forces there, they wouldn't be able to handle the Manticore Valley. So, El explained that he would take over this valley, and if he succeeded, it could expand the influence of the kingdom. Kena, El's mother, and Serena stood in the room, pondering. Kena gathered her courage and was the first to ask her brother if they could also find a master for her to teach her swordsmanship. El had to admit that this was something they should also pursue. While he could show her some breathing techniques, as he wasn't a master of swordsmanship, he couldn't provide further assistance. So, he told her that they would surely find a suitable teacher for her there, considering the presence of a powerful military force. Kena was overjoyed and thanked him. However, Serena also wanted to become stronger and asked her brother if he could help and continue to teach her. Folding her hands together, she explained that she had felt very weak during the events at the Einhart family estate. Originally, she thought she could defend herself, but when she saw El fighting against the Marquis and his son, she realized that she wasn't as strong as she had imagined. With determination and ambition, she expressed her desire to become stronger. This surprised El but also made him radiant and happy. He wanted to fulfill his sister's request gladly. Their mother also stated that she wanted to become stronger and asked to be taught by him as well. Well, maybe you should start by using your brain, that would already help a lot, he joked. Everyone looked happily at El, sharing the common desire to become strong. He wanted to help them all and asked if they agreed, smiling at them. Afterward, it was time to leave their cozy home and prepare for the next adventure to travel to Tolian Kingdom. In the nearby forest, faint noises were heard. The king of Tolian Kingdom was out with a guard and stopped in the middle of the path when he heard the sounds. Anxiously, they looked left and right to find the cause. One of the guards warned the king to be careful, informing him that the monster rate in this forest was higher than ever before. Worriedly, the king wondered if civilians would continue to be in danger under such circumstances and if there was no hero who could save them. Suddenly, a black and eerie shadow in the form of a devil appeared before them, observing them. Nevertheless, the king and his guards continued their way, despite the dangerous forest and the noises. Eventually, they reached a cliff from where they had a beautiful view of the Tolian Kingdom. The realm lay in the middle of the water, surrounded by a kind of small mountain with a small harbor and a bridge to the mainland. The king sat down at the edge of the cliff, deep in thought, when suddenly another man approached him from behind. It was Duke Laius, a friend of the king, who asked him what he was pondering, if he was worried, and if there were any problems. The king, looking troubled, explained to his friend Laius that he was thinking about his 3 sons. He described how the conflict between them over who should be his successor was worsening day by day. And he feared that one day his kingdom would suffer because of this strife. Laius knelt down to his majesty, trying to comfort him. He said that just as the rain falls to the ground and nourishes the earth, he was certain that this conflict between his sons would somehow strengthen and unite the kingdom. He further explained that he believed the king should appoint his 3rd son, Prince Judmian, as the crown prince for the good of the kingdom. As he wanted to discuss whether he should choose the first prince, Prince Maxel, or the second prince, Prince Cran, as the crown prince, the king interrupted him with a sigh. He knew himself that Maxel treated people like objects and his personality was anything but good. It was terrible and violent. He was also aware of his second son, Cran, who had similar qualities to Maxel, though not as overtly displayed. He had to admit that neither of the two was suitable to be king. Instead, the king recognized that Judmian, his 3rd son, was a warm-hearted and friendly leader whom his subjects deserved and whom he would prefer to appoint as king for their welfare. Unfortunately, 90% of the aristocrats supported either his first son, Maxwell, or his second son, Cran. Some of Judmian's supporters included the highest swordmaster and leader of the royal guard, Captain Duke Laius, as well as the swordmaster of the capital city, Captain Count Lumil. This provided a balance between the three sons, as two leaders of the Order of Knights stood on Judmian's side. However, the king didn't even want to think about what would happen if the first and second princes were to go against their younger brother and try to overthrow him. The mere thought pained his head. Due to this succession conflict, the king couldn't focus as much on state affairs as he would have liked, and the monsters continued to pour out of the forest, attacking his subjects unabated. The king held his head and tried not to lose his composure amidst all the thoughts. He knew he had to try to handle state affairs while also keeping an eye on the monsters. Suddenly, the king realized he was talking to himself and wondered where his friend Duke Laius had gone. Startled, he turned around and saw Duke Laius and his guards tense before him, ready to defend his majesty. Cautionarily, Duke Laius drew his sword and urged the king to stay back and be cautious. The guards realized that they were surrounded. One of the guards asked if they were surrounded by monsters, to which another guard turned suspiciously and began to laugh dirtily. Suddenly, the treacherous guard attacked the one who had just asked the question. The king and Duke Laius were astonished. Duke Laius asked why he would do such a thing and why he had killed his own comrade. The treacherous guard claimed that they had been enemies from the beginning, and more hidden guards emerged from nearby bushes. Duke Laius bravely stood in front of his king and ordered the other guards to do everything to defend him. The treacherous guard told the king to wait a little longer and that it was only a matter of time before they would get their hands on him. She pointed her sword at him and declared that she wanted to kill him herself and would do anything to achieve that goal. The king realized that he had trusted his guards, who had turned out to be traitors. He knelt at the edge of the cliff and asked his god if he had abandoned him and his kingdom. Meanwhile, in the chambers of a magical tower, a tower master sat at a table and communicated with two other tower masters through their magic. Two magic-created screens with runes were floating before him. One of the mages on the other side of the screens asked why he had initiated this meeting when their master was not present. The one who had called the meeting and sat at the table was the magic tower master Karosman. He had a cool red beard and mustache, as well as red hair. The unfriendly mage on the other end of the line remarked that he hoped Karosman hadn't forgotten that they all had much to do and didn't really have time to attend this meeting. Karosman explained that their master had instructed him to hold this meeting and that he should pass on important information to both of them. He raised a finger and said that the first important piece of information was that the plan to kill the current king of Tolian Kingdom in Manticore village was already underway. Once the king was dead, the first Prince Maxwell would take over the throne and everything else. Ryzen, one of the mages sitting at the other end of the screen, suggested that they should use their golems to rid the nearby monster land of monsters and use the military to subjugate the nearby other nations. Ryzen adjusted his glasses and said that this should be an easy task for the golems, as they were the strongest on the entire continent. Karosman continued and explained that their master also had news about a night golem in the Bliard Kingdom. Ryzen was utterly astonished and could hardly believe his ears when Karosman said this. He asked what it meant and who else could possibly create such a night golem if not him. Karosman explained that there was a major incident in the Einhart family where a 7th-level mage and his night golem played a crucial role. Ryzen was once again astonished, his eyes wide open. Karosman explained to the other two mages that the power emanating from the night golem should be at least that of a grandmaster, and he also mentioned that this golem had its own consciousness. Ryzen was speechless and had to ponder for a moment, stroking his beard. He explained that if an Orharthon were gone, he wouldn't be able to create a night golem. Moreover, his regular golem would take around 30 days to create. Ryzen couldn't believe that someone else besides him was capable of creating night golems. And on the level of a grandmaster with its own consciousness no less. However, Kurosman said that was only half the reason for concern because he knew that such a golem couldn't be created overnight. It would take several years to create such a powerful golem. Nevertheless, he said they couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Therefore, he tasked Ryzen with gathering information about this golem and asked if he understood. Ryzen wanted to search and do everything possible to find this person and speak to them personally. While the king was in an ambush and Kurosman, Ryzen and another unknown mage were discussing their devious plans, our protagonist L just lay there on his wall and calmly relaxed. He realized that he was indeed in Tolian Kingdom now, but he wondered how he could make contact with the king. He knew it wouldn't be a good idea to spread rumors about his presence, as it could draw attention from the Einhart family and the Bliard Kingdom, revealing his hiding place. He wanted to somehow meet and talk to the king in a normal and inconspicuous manner, but he couldn't come up with any ideas on how to achieve that. He turned on the wall and desperately wondered what he should do. L's mother stood with his sisters beside him and mentioned that she was hungry and suggested they look for a small place to eat together. L straightened up and agreed. Suddenly, he felt something, and it hit him like a lightning bolt. He wondered where this sudden surge of power was coming from. He recognized the wavelength of the energy and knew it had to be the power of a sword master. Quickly, he jumped up and realized that the power he felt was coming from the north. Since L had probably forgotten to speak and everything happened so quickly, his mother asked what was wrong with him. L skillfully ignored the question and noticed that the sudden surge of power was coming from the forest, where there shouldn't normally be any people. He also realized that this place was very close to the king's palace and wondered if the king might be somehow involved. L's mother continued to ask in bewilderment what was wrong with him and even called his name, but L only apologized and floated away. He told his family to go ahead and have their meal without him. Duke Laius and his loyal guards, who were not treacherous traitors, surrounded their king and did their best to defend him. However, Laius recognized that many enemies were taking advantage of the cover of darkness and using this opportunity to ambush the king. He knew that if the situation didn't change soon, there could be serious danger, and the king would die. Suddenly, one of the enemy knights attacked, shouting the king's name. Faced with the sword swinging towards him, the king wondered if this was his end. However, just in time, L created a shield in front of the king, who had rolled up behind him, deflecting the attack of the knight. The king looked around in astonishment, wondering what had just happened and what had protected him from the warrior's attack. L floated onto the battlefield and said he had no idea what was happening, but he didn't like the idea of someone being ambushed so treacherously in the cover of darkness. He found it to be a bad sign and didn't want to let the attackers simply escape. L looked down at the battlefield and asked the enemy soldiers if they needed a moment to come up with excuses. However, they remained in their fighting stance and said nothing. L thanked them for giving him the opportunity, but he also made it clear that they would still die. The king and his followers were puzzled and couldn't quite understand who L was, what he was going to do, and why he had appeared just now. One of the king's loyal knights shouted at L to please save his majesty. L was shocked to find out that he had just saved the king, while Laius took a more rational approach and told the knight not to act hastily, as L could also be an enemy. L looked at the king and realized that he was indeed King Lidolf of Tolian Kingdom. He turned his gaze to the enemy soldiers and said that he now fully understood the situation and had recognized the enemy knights who were after the king. He explained that he wouldn't spare them for such an act. L raised his hand and shaped a small orb with the swirling mana and the words, misery and destruction, which then expanded into a large portal behind him. Shortly after, one could see Tana's hands making their way through the portal and practically tearing it open. L summoned his Golden Knight Golem right at the beginning of the battle, standing behind him and ready to fight once again for his master. The king and his duke were astonished by this spectacle. While the king had heard the rumors, seeing L in action made it hard for him to believe that they were about a young boy. Nevertheless, he could feel an incredible amount of power emanating from L and wondered who this young mage was. L raised his hand again and created a small ice crystal, which he fired at the ground to freeze the enemy soldiers, hindering their escape and rendering them immobilized. He declared that he could defeat them all with a single blow and ordered Tana to proceed. However, he instructed her to spare some of the enemy knights so they could be interrogated later to find out who was behind this attack. Tana confirmed her master's command, while the king continued to be amazed and fascinated by L's strength, trying to grasp the extent of his magic and understand it. The enemy knights tried to break free from the ice and resist, but they couldn't escape, let alone move properly. Tana followed L's orders and rushed forward. As she ran, she reached out her hand, calling her golden sword to her, which appeared in her hand, enveloped in flames just as it had been on the Einhart family's battlefield. Tana wasted no time and swung her sword horizontally from right to left, swiftly dispatching the enemy soldiers and creating a powerful recoil that killed them instantly. The king and his duke were once again astonished by the overwhelming power of L and his golem, trying to comprehend what had happened in that split second. L thanked his golden golem Tana and praised her for her excellent work, to which Tana bowed before him and expressed her gratitude. The king realized that this must be the mage the rumors were about. The highest mage in Tolian Kingdom was currently only at the 6th level of magic, but if the king could win L over, he would finally have a mage of the 7th level in his kingdom. L approached the king and asked if he had been injured, introducing himself as L. The visibly relieved king thanked him for his help. L explained that it was nothing and that he had only taken care of a few bad guys. He also mentioned that he deliberately left some of them alive so he could interrogate them to find out who would do such a thing to him. He hoped that would settle the matter and that such ambushes could be minimized in the future. Meanwhile, the king's loyal guards were busy arresting the remaining traitors. The king was astonished that L not only saved his life but also had the foresight to think beyond that. He invited L to dine with him and emphasized that a simple verbal thank you would not be enough under these circumstances. L played along, pretending to consider the invitation, but ultimately accepted, which made the king very happy and gave him a radiant expression. The king explained that he would inform his mage about the invitation and would order him to deactivate the seal that prevented teleportation magic intrusion so that L could drop by during the day. L thanked him for that and then apologized, stating that he must leave now. He conjured a magical circle beneath him and prepared for teleportation magic. However, as he teleported away, leaving the king alone at the cliff in the forest, he added that he was looking forward to the meeting tomorrow. Duke Laius then approached his king, expressing his relief that things had turned out so well. He believed that the mage and the knight golem who had saved them were definitely involved in the incident at Einhart. Additionally, Laius hoped that they could help with the monster problem they were currently facing. The king turned around and asked his friend if he also believed that L would manage to reach the 8th grade of magic, still feeling very joyful. He compared today's events to a refreshing rain on dry ground, with Duke Laius remarking that one could see it that way. Except for the fact that they had almost died. When L told his family about his little adventure, they were amazed that he had simply met the king. He explained that he had saved the king from an ambush in the forest and received an invitation to the royal palace. His mother could hardly believe that it had gone so well, but she was happy that her son would be meeting with the king. She asked L how she could win his support and wanted to hear his plan. Although Serena and Kana begged him to reveal the plan to them, L remained steadfast, explaining that he would share it with them later. Suddenly, two men approached their table. One of them hugged L's mother and flirted with his sisters, asking if they would like to spend some time with them. One of the men started touching Serena lightly, but L immediately intervened and politely asked him, with a smile, to keep his hands off his family. The man, who didn't quite grasp the situation, asked who L was. L became somewhat serious and repeated, with a firmer grip, that the man should leave his family alone. Finally, the man understood the message and assured that he would abide by L's wishes. Subsequently, the man and his friend left the inn they were in. Serena and Kana looked up to their brother, who had rescued them like a knight in golden armor, and felt a bit embarrassed. Their mother noticed this and had to hold back her grin. She knew that her two girls were a bit scared and that El had acted like a true gentleman in that moment. El himself was not aware of the situation, mumbled something to himself, and then said that the two of them should actually be strong enough to handle the situation on their own. This completely ruined the mood at the table for the women, and El's mother just shook her head. The next morning, which was as sunny as almost every day before, El said goodbye to his family as he had to prepare for the meeting with the king. His siblings and mother told him to take care and that they looked forward to seeing him later. Then El activated his teleportation magic and arrived at the king's grand estate. In the room where teleportation magic could bring someone, there sat a man who was annoyed that he had to unlock the seals protecting the estate from people entering by means of teleportation magic. He wondered which important person was coming that he had to do such a bothersome task. Bored, he sat in his chair, resting his face on one hand and crossing his legs, wondering how long it would take for the guests to arrive. Shortly after, however, he noticed movement in the middle of the room. He quickly jumped up and recognized that it was the mana of someone on the 7th level of magic. He was astonished that he would see someone so powerful right away. El appeared and successfully landed in the estate of his new king. The man who had been waiting for El and received him immediately asked if he was the one who had saved their king's life. El turned around and confirmed it, upon which the man approached him, hugged him with tears in his eyes, and said that there would finally be a mage of the 7th grade in the kingdom again. He was glad that he would no longer feel so burdened. El didn't understand the situation and wondered who this old man was and what was going on here.